Bradley Holly does not get going. Everybody has to try and take avoiding maneuvers, someone even taking to the grass. And the front row just had a horrible start as Raymond Day also gets swamped. Boucher is going to go from fourth to first by the first turn.
That is now Ozzie Milwain trying to take a little bit of a look. Oh, what a great move by Michael Broomhead. Caught Andrew Hardman napping, and now they're going to be side by side going into the Curva Grande. Is Fonseca and McKenzie still going at it down into Rit. Fonseca holding it out for now. A little bit of a better run, though, for McKenzie.
Oh, and a bump. He gets into the back of him. Fonseca spins off. And McKenzie, is he going to get third? Because here comes Tavitas, and Tavitas takes third away from both of them.
Indeed, and now Almanar looking for a little bit of a fight back. He's going to poke his nose to the inside. That's a very tricky area to try to get that move done. Move's going to favor back, but Almanar's going to hold it around the outside. He has got it done and dusted. A great move for Jonathan Almanar.
Allowing him to retain that sixth position for now, but once again, a better exit, and this time the over-under worked a treat for Corey Lotfila. He's going to get the inside, and this drag race up to 130R should go in his favor, depending on how brave Doug Bacchignone is. Let's see, and not brave enough is the answer.
You heard that exasperation out of me, Joe. A bad push there. Catches it, taps from behind, completely sideways. Massive opposite lock, and he keeps it pointed the right way. Great job, Byron McDonald.
This is it. Big draft. Almost middle of the road there for Topi Kortanimi. Up the inside goes Togo Hisada. He has to get on the brakes, though. They're side by side through 130R. This is the battle for the win on the final lap here. Kortanimi stays defensive. Coming into the Casio triangle. Squeezing him.
I think Pi cannot do much here except break his late as he dares, which he tries and keeps an overlap into the left-hander, around the right-hander. He's got the outside. That tends to see better momentum, and it does this time. But now he's on the long way around from multiple corners and just gets fed out to the outside of the track. It is not there for Karthik Pai, and he finally gives up the ghost. Defensive move out of Mark Kalin denies him for now, but he goes a little wide at the apex.
Does indeed. There you see the move from Jacques Boucher. He's going to try to take it out into that little kink now, but he's going to have to go the long way around Cascades. It's not going to work out, but that's going to open up the door to Bradley Holly. There he goes on through up into the podium position.
A new year means new challenges are afoot, new tracks to race at, new cars to learn about, new secrets to uncover, and new tricks to master. If you want to become a major series champion, you need to know how to do it all. Months of preparation. All come down to today. It's time to see who will start 2022 off strong and who will have to go back to the classroom and the drawing boards. This is the Majors Garage 2 Hours of the Glen, live on the Global Sim Racing channel. Hello everyone and welcome to the first race of the European Region's Pro Split season at iRacing's virtual Watkins Glen International. My name's Justin Prince. Alongside me in the booth for the start of this brand new season is Christian Challenger and Jake Sperry. Behind the scenes is our director today in Zach Johnson, and he's using cameras provided by the great Dougie Beard. Today takes us to a track which was recently updated, in fact, during the last iRacing build, Watkins Glen International. Let's learn more about this track with our GSRC track guide.
Welcome to Watkins Glen International. Situated in upstate New York, just south of the Finger Lakes, this track has seen it all. Few road circuits can boast hosting Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, and IMSA during its history. Though it did have a brief fallow period in the early 80s, thanks to the investment of local companies, it's grown into one of the premier road tracks in the U.S. With 4 layouts to choose from that range between 2.5 and 3.5 miles in length, lap times can vary greatly. But it also means it's suitable for lots of different levels of racing, from amateur to pro. The one thing that stays consistent no matter which car and which layout you're using is that Watkins Glen means speed. Many of the straights are very long, and the majority of the corners are fast sweepers. Some of them include a surprising amount of banking as well. Combine that with the proximity of the barriers, and this historic circuit retains a very old-school feel. Drivers in lesser-powered cars can expect drafting battles, while higher-powered machinery will test the skill and bravery of their pilots. Some of the turns are visually iconic, such as the carousel and the S's. Others, like the inner loop, the chute, and turn 9, greatly challenge even the expertly skilled. And of course, we haven't even mentioned the drastic amount of elevation change drivers experience. Between its rich history and popularity among drivers, this track stays busy and seems likely to be that way for a long, long time.
That was a look at our GSRC track guide for Watkins Glen. Now, Jake, I turn to you first because this track has had a long history in motorsports and has a bit of updating with some of the curbing in turn with the new build. What can you tell us, though, about Watkins Glen for today's action to start the brand new season?
Well, when this track was created, Justin, it was the sort of circuit that was actually run the other way around. The 90 actually was the first corner on the circuit, but the other way, and that small run between turns 1 and turns 2 was actually the home stretch. But today, with the boot layout and how this track forms here in upstate New York, it's a 12-turn, 5.55 kilometer, 3.5 miler. And to be quite frank with you, it's a real challenge. The curbs, I mean, you can be more aggressive with this track than you could have been in the past. But just because it's aggressive and just because they're flat curbs that you can go and attack doesn't mean that you should. We've got multi-class racing here today. It's going to be a tough challenge. Watch out for incidents on the opening lap, in the inner loop, in the S's, and down into the chute. Outside of that, when it comes to the race, it's turn 10 that will be the biggest challenge. It's off camber and up the hill.
It's going to be so challenging in turn for these drivers to try and conquer this racetrack for the next 2 hours. And keep in mind, for some, they have the chance to try and add to historic measures from 2021 season. Let's take a look towards how those standings went from last campaign, because for those who missed that season, Dallas Pataska took home the Pro Driver Standings Championship over Pete Herod, 45 points that advantage over Handsome Pete. Kirk Crum, Sam Harper, Melvin Erwich rounded up the top 5 in those respective point standings. On the sportsman side of things, Adam Fesciponti had a very strong campaign in turn, 43 points ahead of Brandon Clunge. Sean Brown had also scored well with Mike Gaunt and Jan Brony rounding out the top 5 in the sportsman side of the point standings for 2021. Legend side of the point standings also seen David Baker score very well. 407 points, 43 points ahead of Ray Partridge, Bob Beltrami, Glad Belval, Richie Hearn, the top 5. Legend Sport seen Brony in turn take that championship over Wolf Dietrich Hotho, Colin Ward, Simon Thorns, Andy Banfield, rounded out the top 505 points behind the championship winner for that side. And in turn, remember, the team dynamic was very interesting last season, Christian. The pro team standings were fairly close until the final round.
Yeah, pretty much all season it was a battle between the Grizzly TFR teams, and TFR Le Mans obviously came away with the championship with 1497 points. The Bombshell Racing team kind of ran it pretty close, but unfortunately fell 102 short. And Grizzly TFR Daytona, that started out strong, ended up actually finishing in 3rd with 157. A little bit further back than that, we had Doug Bay Euro, who were 461 behind, and Team Mad, who rounded out top 5, 738 points back. And moving on to the sport team standings, we had Missed Apex F1 Podcast Team 1 were the eventual winners with 924 points. Hanson Brothers Racing were 166 back in 2nd, with HW Racing 317 points back in 3rd. Black Tree Race Crew came home 4th with 409 points off the lead. And the second Missed Apex F1 podcast team, Team B this time, rounded out the top 5, 526 points off the lead.
That's a look at how 2021 fared out, but a brand new slate means a brand new chance for many of these teams and drivers to score points in 2022. Let's take a look at today's race details, Jake, as we get ready for the season opening run of the campaign.
Absolutely. We find ourselves about 7 minutes away from the gridding up process, but this first race is a 2-hour event, so we do know that we're going exactly to time. Once 2 hours shuts down, that is the final lap of the race. We did talk about it being multi-class, and it's LMP2 and GT3 that we have here today. The LMP2 seems today to be a lot more popular than the GT3 is, so we're expecting a lot of drivers to try and make that progress through, and it could be a very, very busy one up near the pointy end of the field. They can't afford, though, to be too lax with the track limits around this place today. They know that this is going to be a very important challenge. They've only got 40 incident points to play with. Otherwise, their race is going to be pretty much all over. There is no drive-through penalty, only disqualification when you reach the limit of 40. And crucially, you got the spare car, the T-car as I like to call it, one fast repair available for work here today. That means that if you do have a crash in the opening lap, and you find yourself having to take a tow to the pit, your race isn't necessarily over. You do have the chance to get back into the race should something go awry with some of your competitors.
And now, for these drivers, that preparation is about just 6 minutes away from seeing the results of that for the course of 2 hours. Let's first talk about the charity in support for today's action, National Multiple Sclerosis Society. The National Multiple Sclerosis Society exists because there are people with MS. Their vision is a world free of MS, and everything they do is focused so that people affected by MS can live their best lives as they stop MS in its tracks and restore what has been lost and end MS forever. For more information, visit nationalmssociety.org. Drivers are in the midst of their final practices. Keep in mind, they did qualify earlier this week, and some of the drivers did have some close times up at the board, separated in some cases by a 10th in that session. Dallas Pataska set the best time for the GT side of things. When it comes to the prototype side of things, it was Chris Barrett who actually set the quickest time in those qualifying runs, a 1 minute 31 second .0919 was the qualifying time that was recorded up on the board for the 024. So some great pace in turn, Christian, but some new drivers looking to settle themselves on in, because guess what? The top 5, they weren't here a majority of last season on the practice board.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I'm actually keeping an eye on for the GT3 class is that with it being a 2-hour event, and actually this is quite a fuel-heavy racetrack, so they are pretty tight to making that 1 hour mark. We did see one driver able to do this to great effect actually in the international race. Sam Harper was able to make the race on one stop, and he did end up winning the GT3 class by doing so. I'm very curious to see if anybody is able to do that here. I believe Pataska's pace is a little bit stronger than what we saw in the international race, so might actually make it a little bit harder for him to be able to make the fuel mileage he needs. But they're looking at something in the region of a 67 to 68 lap race, so they're going to need to be able to get out to about 33, 34 minimum on the first run to be able to make that even possible, I think.
And keep in mind as well in that, Christian, too, some of the drivers in turn on the practice charts are also new competitors on that side for GT3s, such as Sean Campbell, Thomas Cope coming from some of the sportsman races. You also have drivers like Ryan Walker in the field with a brand new look satellite racing machine. In the 97, you see now looking very orange, white, and black instead of the red, white, and blue they've been well known for years.
Yeah, and it's actually a little bit difficult for me to kind of recognize the cars out on track now, so I sort of wish they hadn't changed that, but you know, it is what it is. Everybody gets different sponsors and whatnot, so yeah, just have to get used to that over the course of the season. And yeah, actually speaking to Pataska pre-race, the driver he was worried about in the GC3 class was Sean Campbell. He felt like his pace was pretty close to his own, so I expect a pretty tight battle between those two.
Now, Jake, who are you keeping an eye on to try and start off the season right? Because there are a lot of returning drivers, but in turn, a lot of newcomers that can really shake up that dynamic for the points, especially here on the road course side early.
Well, you just got to look at the top of the board in practice, really. Maximilian Senna-Muller is up there 0.2 of a second clear of anybody else at the moment in the LMP2 category. It's not often that you see a driver look so strong in terms of that regard. When you've got a middle name, which is Senna, you absolutely have to live up to the reputation when you're driving a race car. He's doing that to a great effect, and hopefully he doesn't make this race pretty much as one-sided as Patriots-Bills was last night.
I see you were staying up all night to watch playoff football.
I was. My Bengals did well. They made their way through, and my best friend's a big Patriots supporter who didn't have the best of nights.
I actually didn't know you were a major American football fan on that regard. Lots of people were watching that action, and lots of moments happened, let's put it that way, in terms of some of the more memeable moments from that playoff game you're referring to. Not going to mention why, of course. But of course, we're under 90 seconds away from the start of the season, and we'd like to once again remind you that this race is presented by Majors Garage. The Majors is sponsored by The Majors Garage, home of free baseline plus setups. Get help from any of the garage coaches 24/7. Sign up now for awesome, affordable monthly subscriptions, telemetry, coaching, and more at majorsgarage.com, or use our special discount code MajorsGSRC to get 10% off. Yes, that's 10% off. We have a link in the description for the YouTube version of this broadcast below that directly applies to the special offer mentioned for that code. Lots of excitement about the brand new season. Jake, your predictions for how the start of the year is going to go?
Depends really on how they get through the first lap. If it's a clean first lap, we're going to have a clean and exciting race. If we have a few dramas on the opening lap, I expect it to be a very long season for the drivers. It all starts here. This is the tempo setter. You set a precedent in this series, and if they do run into some troubles early on, then I see this one being a very chippy championship from now to the end.
What about you, Christian?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Jake. This is quite a familiar combination for most people, so this should be an opportunity to get some solid points on the board. Obviously, if you end up going backwards through the bus stop on lap 1, that's going to be a long afternoon and really a big opportunity lost. So definitely got to make this one count with something that's pretty familiar, I would say, over the course of the season.
All the drivers have been working throughout the past few weeks and months to get to this moment. It's time to see the first starting grid of 2022 for the Major Series for the European region and its pro split. The drivers now taken to the grid as Chris Barrett will start on the pole today, starting alongside Jamie Conway, two newcomers to this season. Theo Chevrolet starts in third position today with James Ibrahim in fourth spot. Keep an eye on those orange machines, they've been quick in practice. Ross Banfield starts in fifth today overall. This is the month still, your Delora P217s with Gabriel Rudes back in the field in sixth. Then it's Campbell Hashimi in seventh position with Michele Sangali in eighth spot for Leo Racing Team. Ninth spot goes to Frank Schmitz, and Jens Holman rounds out the top 10 for the brand new season, Jake.
Certainly does. Anthony Cassels then will go from 11th alongside Miguel Freitas in 12th 999 car, hoping it's not going to be a police accident. Joshua Wolf goes 13th along with Mark Stevens 14th. Maximilian Senna-Muller surprisingly down the order in 15th position has Adam Facciaponte for company on row 8. Nick Sidgley and David Soranzo will have row 9 of the grid, as Travis Henderson and Cordell Colon will make 20. And just to run through the other two drivers in the category will be Antonio Navarro and Tom Dreiling.
And don't forget about the old 7. Was about to say, Requado's also in that grouping. Christian, to you.
Yeah, Dallas Patasker on the pole. We've seen this quite often in the GC3 field. And Sion Campbell alongside him, not too far behind, a little bit further back than we would expect in qualifying, but I think in the race he'll be there. Ryan Waschalski is in third spot with Thomas Cope in fourth. Ryan Walker, the other satellite driver, driving the Lamborghini, I believe. He's back there in fifth with David H. Baker alongside him in sixth. David Malloritz, we saw him feature quite prominently towards the front of the field last season. He's in seventh with Trevor Vavrovsky alongside him in eighth. Bram Reiners and Pete Harrod lining up at the tail end of the field in the GC3 class here, starting P10.
That's a look top to bottom for today's action. as these drivers get themselves ready to go. 2 hours up on the board here at Watkins Glen International in Sim Day, June 26, 2022, approaching 11:10 a.m. Eastern. Track conditions fairly cool, 93 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 34 Celsius, 71 degrees the air temperature today, 22 degrees Celsius being that counterpoint. Mostly cloudy skies as well, and fairly calm winds today, just 3 miles per hour, 5 kilometers per hour, going to the west in the southwest currently. Now let's talk about the keys to the race. Christian, your keys to victory here today.
I get through lap 1 and then stick to your strategy, really, and especially once we start to get multi-class interaction, just be predictable if you're in the slower class, and likewise the same goes for the LMP2s as well. The best way to kind of make multi-class work is for everybody to just do what they normally would do, and then everybody else who's either being overtaken or doing the overtaking knows exactly what the score is. So I think that's really the key here. Be predictable and stick to your strategy and try not to make mistakes.
And your counterpoint, Jake, especially knowing the strategy windows these drivers could be in.
Well, the key here is stretch the tank as long as you possibly can. This is the sort of race where if you can save yourself a couple seconds when it comes to the final stop, or the only stop that you've got, that's going to be key. I caught an eye on Gabriel Roos in the 323 prototype going through the bus stop chicane there, and he completely skipped it. It's a complete straight line as you go through. He completely cut that chicane, which tells me one thing and one thing only. The 323 does not want to turn the wheel at all. He wants to save as much rolling resistance as possible.
Keep in mind as well, there is a little bit of pressure for some drivers. They have been warned there is a 107% rule in effect as well today, Christian, meaning if you run at a pace 107% slower than the pole time, you may not be allowed to keep going. In our words, if you do a time, say in the prototypes at a 137 or the GT3s in the 150s, you could be in trouble.
Yeah, but that is very, very slow, so I wouldn't expect anybody to really be out in those times unless they have significant damage to their car, which is now fully repairable. So I'm hoping that we won't see anybody parked for minimum speed violation.
It is worth noting, though, keep in mind when it comes to this type of racing in case the worst does happen. But the drivers are currently warming up their tires and just about set to begin what's expected to be a wild start to the season. New drivers, new chances, new opportunities. And for one group, Apex Technologies Racing, they get the chance to control the field with a 1-2-3-4 at the head of the LMP2s. Their Dolores are all set to go. We're all set to go from Watkins Glen. Green flag is out. We're underway for the 2022 Major Series European Pro Split Region season. Chris Barrett with a great launch into the 90 to start things off, side by side for third. Everyone gets through cleanly when it comes to the Dolores. Meanwhile, on back, Jake, the GT machines are going in for their run to the 90.
Yeah, it was a very nice staggered start already, slowing way down and going all the way to the back of that group is David H. Baker. He's got a plan in place then as he drops to the back of that group, but a nice clean start is exactly what we want to see, but a lot of drives already in trouble. One of them is Michele Sangali, and there's trouble now at the bus stop here, and someone's upside down.
That's going on right now, MP2 71 machine. Jens Holman is stuck along the wall. Another is upside down as referred to. That's Mark Stevens, who started in 14th, one of the quickest drivers in practice. That came after trying to dodge that car mentioned along the edge of the track. It appears most of the other competitors from the GTs have not reached those prototypes involved in the incident. They are both either off track or running.
And it's just so quick that something like this can happen. It was Jens Hohmann who was the catalyst to all of that. But we talk about this race being a race of 2 hours, but it can so easily be lost in the opening 2 minutes of a race like this. And we've seen that already in the early stages, just how much drama can find itself situated in this field. And ultimately, a lap is score complete. They already make that run here on towards that front stretch. But for Barrett, he's got no worries at the front. His teammate Conway there just behind. And this should be a race where you settle down, you find a rhythm early, pushing a little bit wide there through turn number one. You've got to be careful about how much you push out on turn 1, because unlike what was with the old build here, Justin, going outside over those curbs does get you an instant point.
That's going to really be testing the spacing for some of these drivers with that 40 incident point limit today. But both drivers involved in that lap 1 incident, when it comes to these machines, are now off the track for now, either getting repairs or taking a tow. And let's take the chance, see what happened with that respective incident with the GSRC replay machine. Early troubles. This is after one driver had also missed the bus stop.
Yeah, that was Sangali there who'd missed the bus stop, and you can just see there the chain reaction that comes into play. Homan gets himself in a completely wrong position. That balanced cold tyres opening lap, always going to be drama. And here's Ibram. This is a secondary incident there. He gets the tap going through the carousel section, finds himself outside, dumped into the tyres. So it seems like Prototypes had a very hectic start. You could see there from Sangali's view there. He had tried to turn, he wasn't there, and there was the unsettling for car 71, and effectively, you chose the outside, you chose wrong.
So some big troubles for the 71 and the 141. Stevens did have to take the full tow. 71 did make it to the pit lane to take the fast repair that is available to drivers if necessary. Wild start so far on that side. Meanwhile, Dallas Pataska, for reference when it comes to our GT machines, the GT3 specifically, sees Pataska holding a train in front of Sean Campbell, Thomas Cope leading that charge up in the top 3, Christian.
Yeah, no, I've got to think that there's a bit of a play going on here by Pataska to try and save as much fuel as he can whilst retaining the lead of the class. That said, obviously, the need to save fuel is much easier for Sean Campbell. He can just sit behind Pataska whilst this happens, but it is keeping our GT3s a bit more bunched up than I think I might have expected seeing the qualifying times. So, you know, that's definitely a good thing, I think, and we'll have to see if they are able to actually make the lap target they need to do this on one stop, which I still believe is around about 34 laps, but obviously the pace lap really hurts with that, with it being a full lap, so you've got to try and save as much as you can there. And then even if you can only get to 33, it's going to make your life much easier. So really, if I see anybody pitting on 32 or earlier, I'm very certain that they're going to have to make another stop.
Definitely going to be a thought process. As here comes the 71. Holman is trying to make up for lost ground and is now passing by the GT3s. That's going to make things pretty challenging. Already traffic management not even 5 minutes in as a result of one of the drivers who had to pit early.
And this is one of the big dramas that you see as you have to navigate through and gain those positions again. It's not a case of, say, under braking the issue's going to be. It's going to be on the straight. You've got much more power, but the key of the GT3s, they're very good on that mechanical grip, so they're going to be even with you through the corners. You can see fighting a nose in, and it's on the exit. You're going to have to be patient, put the power down, and there you can see breezing on by. That's the perfect way to make an overtake. You can't force overtakes when you're trying to go through. You have to wait for them to come along to you. It's almost like trying to be very patient, trying to be very stoic in the way that you conquer getting by some of these drivers. And there's a spinner. Is that Sangali again?
Yes, it is, and it's in the bus stop again. And it seems these drivers are having some hard lessons, Jake, in how to manage those new curves, because on second incident involving those curbs in the first 6 minutes.
Yeah, Michele Sangali then, who had to abandon on lap 1 going through, gets himself in more trouble than the second time through. And it's the third curb that gets him. It's that transfer left to right, which leads on forward. These curbs, yes, they may be a lot flatter and a lot more wide and expansive, but they are also ridged in the middle to deter and unbalance the car as you go through. So that is the big deterrent you have. You can't take a million miles of curb. You know, you can get a flat curb like this, and it's very much like trying to bring Tony Hawk to a vert ramp. You say, come on, you'll have some fun. Last thing you want to do is break a leg.
Unfortunately, meatball flag means essentially that has happened to the race car itself, as something's broken in it. Meanwhile, in the heart of the pack when it comes to Art Laura's, they are continuing to try and scrap it out a little bit. See right now some of the drivers up towards the edges of the top 10 trying to battle hard, including this one. The 07 and the 12 side by side. That's Joshua Wolf getting the run this time to move up to 9th +4. But the 07 is already up 11 spots despite that.
That is a great defense, by the way, from Josh Wolf. He had to really fight hard. He missed the apex at the 90. Queiroz did everything right, used all of the track, got alongside, but just couldn't manufacture the final overtake that got everything done. It's a very tough track sometimes to defend from in front because the draft is so prevalent and so heavy here, and we've just seen one very, very good defense, and it allows him to stay in contact with Anthony Castles.
You see already Queiroz wanting to take some pokes as well. One driver a little bit wide, that's Wolf. Testing out some of the runoff area, a crossover. Queiroz to the inside, coming back towards the final corners of the racetrack. Move up the 07 to the 9th position. Wolf not backing off easily though, finally does. Along the outside, uses a bit of that extra runoff area. And Christian, keep in mind, when this track was updated at the start of the new iRacing calendar, 2022, back in December, essentially, they added this runoff space for drivers to be able to have that space like in the real world and with this same curbing.
Yeah, and obviously in the past that used to be a gravel trap out there, so you really could not run wide at that corner because it's so detrimental to obviously end up out in the gravel. But now with it being a paved section, you can... I still don't feel like there's a ton of pace to be had by using that specific runoff pad, but obviously if you're in a side-by-side battle with someone, it's much less dangerous to be side-by-side through that corner than it used to be. And I think that's... I'm not in favor of paved runoff, but I think that's probably good for racing.
Seems well the VR headset's in full effect as well. Meanwhile, up towards the very front, as all this has been going on, Jake, two drivers have ran away from the rest of the pack. 2.5 seconds, in fact. Conway, Barrett, they've worked together, and they've ran away from the rest of the field so far.
Well, I think it's the driver in third who's been really doing a job. It's the 7 of Theo Schleret, who has done a pretty good job here of holding Gabriel Roos back there in 4th position. His job is very simple, just to mind the two drivers in front, give them a little bit of room to go out there and construct their own race. And if Gabriel Roos starts getting aggressive and starts attacking, well, that's good. If you break away from him, that's even better because he's clearly not a threat in the 3-2-3. It's always tough when you've got a team against this, and this goes all throughout the majors, all the way back to the likes of the Torque Freak days, the likes of Tim Kleissens, for example, as a driver who could very easily do that. But they've got bigger fish to fry, I'd say, at this point, because we've just hit the lapping cycle.
And that's the back end of the GTs. David H. Baker amongst them, they're passing. Ryan Wojciechowski, who's had a up and down race so far, also amongst those getting passed right now at the back of the grouping. So some of the traffic about to say hello to the first time to some of the leaders. David H. Baker having to try and dart to the inside hard. Gabriel Roos catching up some time as a result of that.
I don't think he's done anything wrong there, David H. Baker. What you get is there's a little look into the chute there of that left-hander. I think the key as well, when you are slower traffic, is hold your line. It's the first thing you're told, is hold your line. Your quicker cars will try and overtake you. Oh, and there goes David H. Baker. He's in the fence. He's just been turned by one of the LMP2s.
So trouble already with the traffic management for the first time today. Significant damage for Baker. It's a meatball flag. He was 30th on track before the incident, but the 33 has now been spun as a result of Ross Banfield making contact.
You can see here, he just tries to go for the inside, and that's just clumsy, in my view. You don't leave it that late to dive to the inside. You're not in a battle. You're not in a position. It wasn't going to harm you to be a little bit more patient, get yourself to the inside, compromise yourself a bit more. It was just late. It was clumsy, and you have to say, David H. Baker, he is just trying to stay out of the way and get himself turned into the corner. He did move ever so slightly, but for me, that's on the LMP2.
So likely a repair having to be used there, as Baker definitely going to need to make it to the pit lane here. That suspension is gone. It's very gone. Meanwhile, the battles are not gone yet, because here comes a swap for third. Rude's making the move this time into the inner loop this time, Christian. A good move for the 323.
Yeah, and Gabriel's obviously very, very fast in a prototype, kind of always has been, so was a little bit surprised to see him starting back in 6th, but has wasted no time moving forwards and is now up into the 3rd spot. So we'll have to see if he can run down this lead pair, who have to be honest, had pretty quiet race so far. They have swapped around. Obviously, Jamie Conway's taken the lead from Chris Barrett, and that's pretty much the only thing that's happened.
They've actually separated out, it's worth noting, those respective leaders, but it's also noting, though, Jake, when it comes to these orange and blue machines, this is a new team to this season for this series, I should say. And Barrett and Conway are their top drivers in terms of iRating, which is from the official racing iRacing scoring standpoints for how the splits go, essentially. Basically, Barrett's been on the sim for 7 years, 1.5 for Jamie Conway. They've had experience running in 24-hour action in this car. They've finished well in either Endurance Series competition, Sports Car Open Endurance Series competition 2021. They've worked hard with this specific car as a team to be good at it and be fast and become an elite group.
Well, this is one of the things that you find with a series like this. Some drivers are going to have a car, for example, like this one. This great battling going on for third, by the way, as Schleray, we just saw in the back of the shot, was diving hard trying to get through. And he's, in fact, just made the move to make it back to 1, 2, 3 for the team. You know, you get some drivers who, for example, are specialists in the LMP2 and are going to be really good and really quick in the team to beat in an LMP2. But you've got to remember, this is the sort of championship where it doesn't matter if you're just quick in an LMP2. You've got to be quick in many different types of vehicles, at many different types of circuits, with many different forms of racing. And how good are you going to be on an oval? How good are you going to be on a dirt track? How good are you going to be, say, in an open wheel machine? How good are you going to be, say, on one of the basics, on one of the road style cars? This is what you have to keep dealing with time and time again. You go out there and race. There's another little look to the inside, not quite managing to make it happen. But the key is, it doesn't matter if you're quicker in the first race, you pick up the points on a comfortable canter. It's how you can adapt, and this is the series where if you are the most adaptable driver in the field, you can win the championship.
Absolutely correct on that, especially as we've seen throughout the trends for this series over the years. Keep in mind, by the way, that 7 machine you mentioned with the battle going on for third is also the team's graphic designer, Jake, showing just the amount of depth this team group has. And the top 3 drivers on the track all are under the age of 24. So a lot of youth in that way. But they also bring in turn, if you look on their team side, some stock car ability when it comes to Conway, more so road course for the 24 or rather the 42 in the 7. So an interesting team to watch for when it comes to their prototype side. Let's put it that way. By the way, go ahead.
Absolutely. I remember when I was 24. That was about a couple of weeks ago now at this point. But you definitely get to see that. You get all sorts of drivers that come in and try and race and try and learn and adapt. And I think those who have been in the service a long time, you talk about some drivers who have been here 7, 8, 10 years even to some point, and you still, 27, 28? You know, you start getting that experience and you're learning to drive. People have built sim racing careers out of what has been a niche that has grown and grown, and year on year we're seeing that growth and development in iRacing. We're seeing more and more drivers jump in, and you know, we've seen that a year and a half. You know, that was the next great boom that we saw in iRacing a year and a half ago when everything started to shut down. Everyone flocked to iRacing and said, we want to go racing because we can't do it anywhere else. And a lot of people have stuck around and stayed through that and gained some nice iRacing. Jamie Conway, for example, is one of those in the 42. He sets another fast slap on the 31.2. He's trading those times with Sangali. And you are seeing drivers who maybe 2 years ago wouldn't have even touched this with a wooden barge pole. Now you've got these drivers coming in, and we're seeing this very dynamic change, not just here in something like the majors, but all throughout sim racing. New drivers are coming to the forefront.
Absolutely. Battle for third back on the line again. Gabriel Ruse is not backing off, and that costs him. Ruse has spun it. Ruse off the racetrack.
There was contact there, and Schleray was always going to try and hold his line going too wide. You're always fighting for it. He was entitled to the track. He got half a nose in front, but as he understood, Roos was trying to be cheeky, take the natural line, didn't give Schleray the room there on the inside, and ultimately, that is his undoing there in the 3-2-3, and that's why he's down about 5 places now.
Let's take a look at this once more, and possible internet-related contact. Watch right there, touch there. They were about a foot apart, unfortunate for 323. That battle lasted for a while, Christian, but in the end, Ruse is spun back to 12th.
Yeah, it's always a risk going too wide through the bus stop, and the risk kind of goes up more and more the faster the car is. And obviously with the LMP2 there, it's tight. You're obviously going to use the curbs to try and get as much pace as you can, and just unfortunate there for Gabriel that he's been sent around by that. But it doesn't look like he's picked up any damage at all, so for sure he's going to be able to fight his way back. He just has lost quite a lot of time and lost at least about 8 to 10 seconds throughout that.
Of note, Mark Stevens, the first DNF of the race, had now parked it after having that several-minute tow. A couple drivers in total have had to come to the pit lane. Zangali, we mentioned from before the issue in the bus stop. Holman with the faster pair in the opening lap. Baker is currently the furthest back after a faster pair sequence as well. Here's a look, meanwhile, at that grouping. Smits, Banfield, Quiros. And it looks like we has settled on down at the draft for Banfield and Smits. Keep in mind, Smits, a few laps ago, did pass on by the 777. But the Apex Missers machine is not missing the mark too badly so far, Jake. Actually hitting the Apexes. That time missed it, actually.
Ever so slightly, but it's not going to cost really too much in terms of this group. It's a very, very intensive train. It goes all the way to Schleret, who's in third position. You got Hashimi in there, Smits, Banfield, Quiros behind that. You got Freitas and Castles who are there. Muller's not too far back in terms of the mix. Same for Josh Wolf, same for Gabriel Roos as well. So it goes all the way back to about 12th place here, and this is a fight for third. So we've got a really intense mid-pack going on, but I think the big key is staying out of trouble early, and that's what Rui Quiros has done absolutely fantastically so far. He's up an eye-watering 14 places in 19 minutes.
Absolutely incredible pace, to say the very least, for the 6.6K iRacing and iRating driver. One of the quickest drivers on the racetrack, too, running 132 flats. The leaders had blistering short-run pace, but his long-run pace is matching that of the cars who are 1-2 currently. Keep in mind, the cars actually in front there, Jake, too, in the grouping with the 07, are running up to 2 to 3 tenths slower than what those top two are running.
They certainly are, and the gap now is almost 10 seconds now back to that group that's moving forward. So they're settling down into a rhythm and a pace that they just can't match then of the top two. So it's going to be a race between those as Barrett and Conway find themselves split by about a second. But I think this mid-pack's going to be where the interesting racing's going to happen. You don't have to make overtakes out there on circuit to make things happen, as we'll take our second pass through the lap traffic. It's worth noting that Pataska is out to an almost 3-second lead now over Campbell in the meanwhile. But you can see the 37 there of Hashimi gets completely wound up behind David H. Baker. Nowhere to go. Just in front now will be Bram Reniers to try and navigate a way by. But the key here is, where do you catch the traffic and how much of an ability do you have to get by cleanly and effectively? It's a nightmare when you're in a massive pack like this and you encounter traffic, because you've got to try and catch up with the car that's in front of you and stay with, which means drivers sometimes can just get a little bit desperate as they try and follow in the wheel tracks of the car in front of them.
So that 37 indeed losing a ton of time, as you mentioned, as a result of the traffic. And keep in mind, when it comes to traffic management, one of the main things, Christian, is you need to be predictable. That's what drivers prefer, and it seems, and this is no offense to David H. Baker right now, drivers are having a hard time predicting where he will be, and a couple other drivers are predicting right now with how deep some of this traffic is.
Yeah, the traffic management is kind of an acquired skill. I don't think anybody is sort of born with it, and it's definitely one of those things that is extremely important in multi-class racing. Obviously, we saw that incident with Baker, and while I do feel like it's always on the side of the LMP car to make the pass safely, I do feel like he was a little bit in the middle of the track, and that's probably a contributing factor to how that incident unfolded. And the other thing with lap traffic is that you've got to keep in mind that everybody is going to encounter it. So if it's often very frustrating if you're, say, the leader in the LMP class and you catch lap traffic and you see that you lose 2 to 3 seconds or whatnot, and you're like, I've lost that time. But you just have to remember that the next group behind you is going to probably lose the same amount of time, and it's going to ebb and flow across the race as well. So even if you lose that at one point, you'll probably gain again later on. There is a bit of an art to trying to minimize that time as well. Obviously, you can see on the corner exit, the LMP car can pretty easily clear there before the next corner, and that's as good as it gets, really. If you're an LMP, you don't want to catch people in the middle of the corner because it kills your exit speed. It makes it pretty scary for the GT car as well, and it's just absolutely the worst possible place that you can catch them. So that's why we tend to see the field string out as well. Obviously, all these guys were all bunched together until they got deep into the GT field, and now they're starting to string apart. But then when they reach the next GT car, as they just have, they're all back together again because they caught one through the bus stop. So it's very challenging. It's the hardest part of multi-class racing, and it's the thing that takes the longest to learn.
I've just seen that Queros has actually just got past Banfield through all of that.
Yes. And sometimes traffic give it, sometimes traffic taketh. And it looked like a little bit the traffic may have been a part of the taketh. That went the direction of the 07 taking that spot as they navigate more of that traffic now down the straightaway. Schmitz now having to brake a little bit early now to avoid contact with Malnerwich, who stays to the outside line. This has also allowed them to all group back up with the third place driver overall now leading the train. They were separated by about a second plus before the traffic. Now the traffic is holding them up again.
Well, the traffic's in a battle right now, so they've got to be really careful about this. You've got Milnarovic and Harrod who are having a race, and then on top of that, you've got Ryan Walker, who's desperately trying to keep in range of the likes of Thomas Cope, who's up there just a little bit further down the field. So you've got 5 and 6, and there's almost contact between Cope and Hashimi going through the 90. Everyone is pretty much on a mad Texas scramble. They can see the 11 with a little bit of smoke popping up. That's Tom Dreiling there, who's had himself potentially a little bit of a moment. So it looks like everyone's just trying to make sure that they can get themselves around. But my goodness, this is what makes life so very, very difficult around a racetrack like this. It's not just the fact that you're dealing with lap traffic, it's the fact you're dealing with not much lap traffic here, as we watch Pete Harrod try and stay on the back of Milnarovic, a driver who he's probably raced about 1,000 times now at this point.
Remember, Handsome Pete was amongst the drivers who were very quick in some of the open wheel events last season, particularly on the road courses, which still has that buffer as they will force some of the LMP2s to go to the outside. One wants the inside. That's the 832 down underneath. Surprising start, though, I will say, for Handsome Pete so far, Christian. Usually expect him around the top 3 in these events.
Yeah, they definitely didn't expect to see him starting last in class, and he's obviously advanced a little bit, but it's seemingly come at the expense of other people's misfortune rather than his own pace, it has to be said. Now, he does have the opportunity to score a top 5 here, which is, you know, something in terms of points for him, but definitely not going to be what he was expecting or was wanting to see, to be already nearly half a minute off the lead after only 25 minutes of the race.
Bram Reniers has had to take a pit stop, by the way, had left rear damage after some of the traffic management. So Reniers has had to take a very early stop, now being 30 minutes into the season opener. Tough break once more for the 8. Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, it's never ideal. I've just seen some side-by-side as Schmitz and Hashimi. We see it on the screen as they go into the bus stop. This is what's making it difficult now as they catch the leader of the GTE class here of Das Pataska. They have to navigate their way around, and they just about manage it, GT3 class, sorry, as we move through. But this is what you're starting to see here. Drivers in a huge pack. They know where they are in the race. They're about 25 minutes in, halfway through the stint, and they've got to try and figure out where they want to be placed moving in towards that pit stop window. It's going to be in the back of their minds when they want to come in and make that stop. And the likes of Rui Queiroz, Frank Schmitz, they all know that they want clean air going into one of the most difficult pit entries that you will find on the service. It's not difficult by how you get in. It's difficult by the fact that if you're in a massive pack like this and someone at the front checks up, it is so easy for you to just slam into the back of someone.
Absolutely agree with you when it comes to that mark. And it can be so difficult in turn to be able to have that awareness of if you get to those situations too. Bruce, by the way, has now gone to a battle with Joshua Wolf. That's David Soranzo, who's also in that grouping. And remember, the 73, Christian, was one of the drivers who came in late last season and had some decent runs to close out the campaign on both the ovals and the road courses. New look this season, though.
Yeah, and this group is just a little bit off this pack that we've got that are fighting for third, but obviously if there's any more lap cars that kind of hang up that group fighting for third, then they'll all be in this fight. And obviously even more so with pit strategy and whatnot, and especially with the pit entry, that's going to be really difficult for everybody in this battle for third, because as you both mentioned, it's just difficult to kind of let people behind you know. Obviously you can call out over the radio that you're pitting and whatnot, but it's pretty unnatural in the way that it peels off the racetrack. It's not what everybody's really used to at most tracks. You kind of have to go into the corner as though you're going to run it normally, but then really pull it up on the apex. So very, very easy to get ran over. So yeah, I totally think that drivers such as Sorrenzo are still within a chance of getting into this battle for third here, but we've got so many cars involved. You can see it runs just all the way down pretty much to 10th place just as the group, and then those guys just hanging off the back a little bit, sure to join it shortly.
New fastest lap, Jamie Conway once again the race leader, still recording 131.1s. The majority of the other drivers in the entire class are in the 133s. That's how big the difference is. By the way, as well, some battling is starting to form up in GT3 action. Wojciechowski was just able to pass both Monerwich and Herod into the bus stop. Handsome Pete now is trying to pass the 69 and wrecks. Herod spins around in front of Monerwich. Handsome Pete now with a not so handsome back bumper.
That's how quickly you can be humbled in this series, and Pete Harrod will know that better than anybody else. He tried to make that move, got himself a little bit caught up there, and it all runs itself into drama. So the Mad Sim Racing car will have work to do now to get back into this race. It might not be the end of the world because he's in a class which has less drivers in it. He might still be scoring a decent points haul here today, but the big key out of it is that was something he couldn't afford to do. Lose the back of Melnarovic, lose the back of Wasilewski.
Yep, both drivers able to run away as a result of that incident. It was a hard set indeed, we'll say, Christian, for Handsome Pete to try and make the move, but with them being zipped on by like nothing by the 86, something had to happen.
Yeah, and we were kind of saying that he was sort of in that fight for the top 5 pretty much on the misfortune of others, and well, it's totally gone against him now. He's at the tail end of the cars on the same lap in the GT3 class. He's back there in 8th spot, so obviously not what he would want, and hopefully for him, because I mean he is a season-long competitor that we often see fighting for the championship. Hopefully the next round is going to be much more productive for him than this one's been so far.
James Ebram has also just had an issue. This was out of the same complex of corners for the boot. This time it was self-inflicted, going through the gears to Christian, and in turn he's elected to pit with Adam Fasciponti as they have reached 30 minutes in.
Yeah, and we'll have to see where the other drivers in the LMP class start to pit. Obviously, we've got this fight going on, and that's going to be what breaks up this line, I think, is if there's any difference in pit strategy, even if it's by a lap or two, is we've got an incident on the exit of the bus stop.
And that involves some of the leaders. Gabriel Ruse amongst those off the racetrack. Major carnage going on in the battle. 8th position, Anthony Castles had something happen in the bus stop. Christian, what in the world just happened?
Well, we were talking about how guys we're going to get broken up in the pit stops. It's obviously happened out on track, and you see there, he's coming through the first part of the bus stop, just loses it on that second curve, and then he gets completely bowled over by everybody behind, who then rejoins the racetrack, and I think that's how Gabriel Roos got turned around and had his rear suspension broken. So very, very unfortunate for the drivers arriving late on the scene, and really just nowhere you can go. You just have to try and hope that you get around the incident before it comes back onto the racetrack.
Well, that was Miguel Freitas, who was involved in that one in the Team Mad Machine, who's also got significant troubles with a broken suspension, but no meatball flag. So several cars with carnage. This is all wow, just moments before. This is what happened with the hard hit for the 832.
Got a little bit lucky with that one, I would have to say. Obviously, we've seen drivers break the rear suspension on the car in similar impacts, backing into the fence like that.
Oh!
And
wow.
more dodgy bargy Here we go again for fourth now, with traffic saying hello as well. The traffic parks it on the bus stop as they try and move out of the way. That's David H. Baker again saying hello.
I tell you what, the bravery there of Kamal Hashimi to just say, I'm going past everybody. I am making sure that this race is going to be one that I'm going to remember. Rui Queiroz there was very much protecting his race. He wanted none of that going into the bus stop with lap traffic in front of David H. Baker. Yes, it's cost him 2 seconds, but, you know, at exactly the same point, he's still in this race, and I think that's the thing he'll be most grateful for.
Ibaruz, by the way, is now out of the car. Meatball flag and that machine appears to have not taken the fast repair, so the 323 may be done. In terms of contention, would put him second to last in class above Mark Stevens. That's indeed the case. You still have under 90 minutes on the clock, by the way. Estimated distance right now for some of these drivers, about 57 this time by for the prototype leaders. For the GT3s, 50 to go at the stripe. And we haven't talked too much about some drivers like, say, Dallas Bataska, or some drivers like this, because Malnerowicz continuing to drop back. That's Abruski making the move this time in the number 10.
Yeah, Malnerowicz has got that right front damage. I believe he picked that up with the incident that he had with Pete Harrod, but it shouldn't be slowing him down too much, though I imagine he's going to try and get that fixed at his pit stop, because it does look a little bit unsightly.
Yeah, you can see the engine, I believe, if you look closely enough through that hole in the front hood right now.
Well, it's just a scoop, so effectively at this point, if you magically create an extra scoop in the car, you're going to be throwing off that aerodynamic balance of the machine. You're naturally going to be losing not only in this race here, Justin, which is so important, top speed, but on top of that, you're actually going to be using a lot more fuel. And we were talking earlier on about how important reaching the right number is in this category of class. If you're going to be losing out on valuable litres a lap, then you're going to be in a world of trouble when it comes to the pit stop. You might just have to do some mega fuel saving on that second stint.
Absolutely. Going to be so critical at this point. There has been a bit of trouble with some contact coming out of the boot, by the way. Handsome Pete and Joshua Wolf have tangled with some traffic management, and now Handsome Pete is exploring the runoff area after near contact by Antonio Navarro now.
Yeah, certainly is, and that's how quickly it can go wrong. But we are in now a pit stop cycle, which is very, very crucial, because into the pits now has come a couple of drivers here and there, and got some great scrapping up the hill now, as this is Queiroz against Schleray. So he's through on Hashimi. Schleray all over it, but watch out. Hashimi's coming into play. Door and paint trading. There's contact straight across. Is there going to be any more drama than that? No. Hard into the wall will go Rui Queiroz, who will feel hard done by and makes his point statement known over radio.
The hashtag racing machine absolutely decimated, the biggest mover of the race by far. Contact with the 7 machine, and is now likely out of contention as a result of that incident. Hashimi nearly followed the 07 off the track, trying to brake with that vision being fully covered by that LMP2 there, Christian.
Yeah, and I think if I'm honest, I've got a lot of sympathy for Queiroz there. I think they were, as a team, even racing him extremely hard. We obviously saw they pretty much gave him the decision as to if he was going to have a crash into the bus stop a few laps ago. He made his displeasure known, I think, going down into turn 1 right before that incident that just took him out of the race, where there was a very, very aggressive pass that he made on Hashimi. And then going into the bus stop once again, I think he clearly had the pace. It's 1 hour and 25 minutes to go, and I think there was pretty aggressive defense going on that he has every right to be upset about. I think I would feel the exact same way in his position here.
They rubbed doors already before the entry. And by the way, as you just seen prior to this GSRC replay machine, Jake, they were pitting that lap.
Yeah, well, some of them were, some of them weren't. So it was going to be a case of do you or don't you? And this is what we were talking about. Track position is so important coming into the pits. That's why Queiroz felt he had to make that move then, because he knew that if he was going to be coming into the pits this lap, he wanted the position to dive into the pits unimpeded.
And instead, the back end of the machine has no rear wing right now. Pit stops are underway right now for a majority of the class. And interestingly enough, Conway and Barrett both took less fuel, a little bit longer stops for the rest of the field, up to 37 seconds, in fact, Jake, for those going for the what appears to be the full service. So the 42 and 024, about up to 10 seconds quicker than much of the pack there.
Yeah, and this is going to be something that we see as a checks and balances style of the race. If you take a short stop here, you might have to take a long stop later. And because we're only 35 minutes through, we're going to be seeing that as very much a case of, well, do you want to take the short stop now or do you want to take the long stop now? And a lot of drivers will feel that the most natural way to go will be long stop now, short stops later, but it can be very, very difficult later on in the race to have that flexibility. If you take a long stop now, you still have that flexibility later on in the race to take that short stop if it's needed. Or, for example, if you get caught in trouble somewhere on circuit, have to take the fast repair, and you still have that short stop available, you can very easily swing that strategy around to still be on track with other racers in this race.
Just triple checking to make sure on some of the stint decisions as well. Not seeing too many drivers in turn, Christian, go up on the jacks. How likely are double stints, let's say, on the tires expected today, especially since the track is getting hotter? It's almost, in fact, is 100 degrees Fahrenheit for reference right now.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised, actually, that we haven't seen drivers in the LMP2 taking tires on the first pit stop, because usually that's the one in a short race where you would want to take tires, because you've started the race with a lower rubber state, which tends to be more aggressive on the tires and whatnot. So it's pretty common to take tires on the first stop, and then if it's kind of a bit of a hit or miss for the last one, you see some variance. So surprised that people aren't taking it on the first one. It makes me think they're definitely going to take it on the second one, though.
A black flag's just been issued in sim to the 71 machine, and curious on the reasoning here. Might be maybe unsafe pit exit if this is going to be the case of having to come back down, because if we can get a look at the GSRC replay machine, Jake, there's a yellow line that you cannot cross before the blue cone, or else you get an unsafe pit exit call. Guess who was already half a car over that line?
Jens Homan by that measure of metric, and having another stop in the pits then for the DH driver. It's not going to be good. He's in, he's out, and he will get himself going again. But that is really going to be the crux of frustration as you go through. It's going to come out into a complete slew of traffic, and you've got to be so alert when you get yourself through. Here's a little look on what you need to do coming into the pits, and this is what's going to make it difficult. He had half a tyre over as he made entry, really struggled there to slow it down in entry. You can see locking at the front tyres as he tries to jump in, but you know, this is the sort of race where you do not want to be getting penalties this early on in, because it's going to take a lot of work to get back to any form of relevancy in this race.
Here's a look at the corner exit. This is what we're referring to, by the way. Watch right here. Clear cut.
Oops.
He almost did it. He almost did it again, by the way, Jake, on the second time out.
Well, first time, shame on you. Second time, shame on me. And that's what can make things very difficult. Now, here's your leading duo in your LMP category. Barrett is now ahead of Conway once again. And they've got a lot of traffic. And it's two types of traffic that they've just managed to get by right now. So a change for the lead, effectively, as Barrett now has control over Conway. And they've just got to be really alert to how they want to race. I think they want to build as much of a gap as possible here, Justin. And then by the time they reach the last 15 minutes, I think it's going to be gloves off. Let's have a race.
Keep in mind, these are two drivers who are well-known friends with one another, because they're huge motorsports fans. And actually, when it comes to Chris Barrett specifically, when he was studying for a master's degree in university, he actually had time with McLaren's Formula One team, and in turn, also is a keen glider pilot, loves to learn anything that flies with or without an engine. And it was during the University Gliding Club is where he met the driver right behind in Conway. So they have a long history of knowing one another over the years. 10 years in sim racing general for Chris Barrett, 8 for Jamie Conway.
And that history should serve them well. They know what they need to do at the front of the field. They've got themselves a very, very comfortable gap actually out in front. And they know that this race, 24 seconds, the margin to Smits in third, they've pretty much got this under wrap unless something astronomical happens in this race. So they know that they've put the race effectively on ice 40 minutes into a 2-hour race. That's pretty impressive. But what they do need to do now is make sure they're firstly A, staying out of trouble, and B, that they're not willing to throw that away by racing too hard against each other. They have a lot of respect, as we've said earlier on, but it comes to a point. You've got to make sure that you're getting through the race first and foremost. Once you're through the race, you can then start fighting for it. They've got to get through this middle phase, which can sometimes be the most dangerous because of the fact that you've got the field so spread out and isolated incidents are more likely to occur.
Keep in mind as well, they have a 25-second advantage over Frank Smits, the current second-place driver who picked up some spots in the pit cycle, by the way. So there is a big cushion just in case that does spark up. You know who also picked up some good spots, Christian? David Soranzo. He's up now to the top 5 plus 13, 29-second pit stop for the 73, a little bit shorter in the box.
Yeah, we've had a lot of shuffling happen inside the top 10 of the LMP class with those pit stops, and a couple of drivers have sort of actually re-emerged into the fight, I would have to say. Sangali was in that group. He might have actually just pit, so he's exiting the fight as soon as I was about to talk about it, but never mind. Yeah, it's definitely not over, I think, for that battle for third. Obviously, the lead two have pretty much escaped, and I think they're just going to run a pace now until we get to, say, the last 15 laps. We've got a 3 wide here, whilst the battle for position in GT3.
Wow, and Wojciechowski actually gained a spot during that. It worked! Somewhat!
Well, that's just confidence there that's needed, really, in that situation. If you're side by side, you've got traffic, you've got to firstly, A, make a lane for the faster cars. They managed that. The Porsche had an easier advantage there, and effectively it was given up by Thomas Cope. I don't blame the 64 car for that at all, but Ryan Waszalewski has done so well to work his way back through the field. He's now 4th in classes. Chase is a couple seconds down the road to Ryan G. Walker, of course, a good friend of ours here at the Global Sim Racing channel, but this really is a case of just manage the traffic nice and calmly. Just make sure it's one at a time. Ibram went through, Navarro went through, now you've got Kamal Hashemi going through, so everybody's making their way through. Just got to count them off. And what's the look on the black box relative behind? How many seconds have I got to the next bit of LMP2 that's trying to go through? And ultimately, if you can keep running like that, race is going to be pretty plain sailing from here, and that's going to be the focus, making sure that every car that goes through gets through nice and cleanly, and your own race is your own race.
Keep in mind for Waszalewski, by the way, he did have a spin early on in the race, hence why he fell down the pylon for those who may have noticed. Able to bounce back since then to his starting spot. Here's a look now at Soranzo and Banfield once again, though, as their prototypes now starting to go for the defensive snakes. How about hard to the inside, entering the inner loop for Soranzo. Banfield gets the better run coming to the outer loop, though. Can't get to the inside, though, to get the 5th position on back.
Start questioning this, though, on how defensive Soranzo needs to be at this point, because you look into the bus stop, he wasn't close enough there, was the car behind, to really try and open it up there. Ross Banfield, a little bit of a mistake there, leaving the door wide open at the toe of the boot and over towards the heel. You'd say that Banfield's got this one unlocked. You defend the corner where there's not going to be an overtake. You leave the door open where to leave an overtake into the heel. I think Soranzo just completely had that backwards, and that was an opportunity effectively forced out of nothing from Ross Banfield.
So in the end, Banfield now up to 5th. 133.4s for those drivers last time. Smits and Charlotte are running 133.2s up the road. We'll see if Banfield picks up the pace. Now it's a clean track. Soranzo does have a 4-second cushion on Joshua Wolf. Here's a look, meanwhile, at some of those drivers for position up the road, and they are dealing with traffic. That is Freitas, who is in the 999 machine. A couple laps down, in fact, who is not making it quite easy for the 7. Now gives some space coming out of the S's.
And that's exactly what you need to see here. Just give the room as and when it's needed. Schmitz is not going to be away forever in this race. And Schleret, 0.4 of a second quicker on that last lap. He is closing that down. I expect that gap to be mighty close between now and the end of this one. And you'd probably say that this middle stage, we saw the big packs earlier on. I think this has started to, I would say, scale back just into 2-car fights and 3-car fights at this stage of the race.
As is the trend with a lot of endurance racing, keep in mind, we see this a lot in these types of events, so that is in the trends. Christian, in turn, one of the drivers who hasn't had to battle too much. Check that! There is a battle for the race lead. Barrett and Conway swapping back and forth, Christian.
Yeah, a little bit early to be racing for the win, I think. And to be honest, that's pretty much my opinion throughout the field. I think we've seen some fairly robust defense for over half the race remaining. These two are really deciding that they're wanting to go at it at this point, which, is surprising when they're so far ahead. They're almost on the verge of being a full pit stop ahead. So
yeah,
there's not much value as far as I can see in having a battle, but I suppose it's a racetrack and we hit a race, so why not?
That is a good point, but you have to think there might be the fuel swap at least to try and help each other save fuel, Jake. That's the first thought, but then again, they went side by side of the S's.
Well, the issue is that they got stuck behind the traffic, and when one car gets stuck behind the traffic, the other one gets a run. Naturally, if they want to have the path of least resistance, there's no point checking up for the sake of it, so you make the move down on the inside in towards the 90 turn number 1, get it done. But if you still got a run coming up the S's section to the prime place of the bus stop, you might as well use it. That would have given them about 0.3 of a second in comparison to just sitting up and waiting. Is it more risky? Absolutely it is. Has it cost them anything? No, it absolutely hasn't. Is it fair game? It is. We love it when teammates battle.
Absolutely. Barrett now up by half a second. More smoke being kicked up. And that's Tom Dreiling, who is not having fun today. Tom has had some very rough moments the past couple of years in the Major Series, Christian. Not been the prettiest of races today. Already one lap down, losing more time. Lost a spot to Ruse with all that sliding, by the way.
Yeah, I'm just surprised he stayed out there. I thought he was looking like he was going to come into the pits there and get another set of tires. But yeah, probably not one of his better races, it has to be said. But he is one of the drivers who has one of the most number of starts in the Major Series. So definitely a long-time supporter of the series, and good to see him back again in 2022.
Indeed. Shows decent speed in the stock cars, give him that credit. To Dallas Pataska, this was the point was trying to head towards Christian. Very dominant so far in the GT3s right now. He does have a bit of left front damage with some of the curbing, believe, but it's been a pretty strong run. He did have a moment, though, because he's got a big send from the inside from an LMP2.
Yeah, looks like just coming into the end of the boot there. The LMP2 just ran a little bit towards the middle of the corner. I don't think Pataska was expecting that. He did have around about a 9-second lead before that happened, so that's undone some of that, that's for sure. But it does look like he's still retained the lead and does still have quite a nice gap actually back down to Sean Campbell. Sean Campbell's still about 4 seconds behind, but this is about the point in the race where I'm going to start keeping more of a focus on the GT3s to see if they can make it out to those 33, 34 lap marks so that they can do this on one stop. And I suspect that Pataska, with the advantage he's enjoyed, really, I would say, he's going to be able to make that distance. But some other drivers in the field, obviously we've seen Ryan Weshalewski has been very quick the past couple of laps, and we know he's fast, but I've got to think that maybe the reason why he's had such an easy time of cutting through some of the other cars is because they are saving and maybe he isn't. So we'll just have to see if he pits earlier than they do.
Remember, had to make up a lot of time for troubles before. Speaking of troubles, Ibram has found troubles. After that incident we've seen earlier before, he managed to spin coming out of the final corner. He is now out of the race and has towed the 832 after a hard slam into the original safety barrier. Remember those big foam blocks that were built in the early 2000s over this racetrack? He got acquainted to them, which ended off the 832's day. Approaching 1 hour to go, the pace continuing to stay blistering quick up at the front to reset your top positions. Barrett, Conway, Schmitz, Gillette, Barrett, Banfield, the top 5. Soranzo, Wolf, Hazemi, the top 8 currently. And some of the drivers from that group just said hello to one of the GT3 leaders, Thomas Cope spun.
That would have been very, very scary at that point for him. There is not much you can do. The Olympics esports car effectively finding the leaders, and that didn't really feel on going for the inside. He did the right thing. He stayed over to the left-hand side, and the moment that he knew that he needed to switch over, it completely threw the balance off of the car. And then just like that, he was always going to be spinning through the final corner. So in that situation, I think, what on earth was that LMP2 thinking that the inside was available at that point?
Yeah, some big hits there for Thomas Cope. A lot of lost time, and Thomas Cope has lost a spot to number 10 and is now outside the top 5 in the season start to this one. Cordell Colon has also now had an issue, and Cordell Colon is backing up into the middle of the racetrack. Colon is stuck along the Armco, now backing up in the middle of the corner exit. No one else is around, though. Colon is going.
Yeah, that was all Colon. He tried to push a little bit too aggressively over the exit, got over the curb then at the heel of the boot, had a very slow tank slapper, fortunate to keep it out of the barriers, actually, by that matter of fact, and is able to keep that race going, but that can be quite awkward, and now you've got a battle here side by side, so that's the 333 car then of Nick Sidgley losing out the position, and they're very comfortably going through. That'll be Castles in the 87 machine taking the place. So we are seeing moves and we are seeing those mistakes. It is quite odd to say that 2 hours is a long time, but you do get drivers who maybe don't have that element of patience to keep the same lap, the same braking marker every time. You do have to take a little bit of time out of your day to find that consistency lap on lap.
And it can also be tricky in turn if you're in that mindset to be able to strategize right, to be able to get the thought process right, to be able to do the math, unless you have someone that is with you to be able to assist you on that. Note, for example, some drivers did take the option of a live spotter today. Charles Boschel is with Thomas Cope today. Handsome Pete has David Grozier on the move for him, and Quados does have Pedro de Souza helping their respective cause so far. Just 3 live crew chiefs up in the boxes today for the Major Series season debut as the cone unfortunately gets ran over. Poor cone. We missed the cone.
Just reminds me, Justin, of what happened at the Chili Bowl just a couple of days ago, where I believe the cone got absolutely smattered, and then one of the marshals went out there on track, gave CPR to the cone. The cone popped up back to life and gave a standing ovation in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Wait, how do you give CPR to a cone?
Well, it's simple. Very simply, you put your hands in a CPR position, you push and push and push, and hopefully the air comes back into the cone.
I'm imagining it with blowing air into the cone, since you technically have that part of the CPR, right? Unless that changed?
Like it's like an inflatable cone, JP? Is that what you're thinking right here?
I'm thinking about the real world person CPR. I don't know what the process is for a cone CPR. No offense.
I wouldn't know either, but
It's not for the 7.
I am familiar with what happened there, and it was rather amusing.
Pit stop for the 7 and just 12 laps in, Jake. Interesting.
Absolutely, and that is a very short stop then for Theo Schleret. And if you're going to get the short stop done now, you're going to have to look around the lap and see, was there maybe a little bit of argy-bargy somewhere there? I'd say no. So this might just be to get out of a cycle of some very, very difficult traffic, take the splash and dash now, and effectively run 2:35s between now and the end of the race, which I think might just be the plan, as leading to continue on their dance through the heel of the boot.
31 seconds now, the advantage over Ross Banfield, who has moved up to 3rd with that pit stop call. Charlotte is still in the stall, for reference sake. Here comes Banfield with a hard cut underneath Walker. Banfield sent it so hard he nearly missed the apex.
Not the first time we've seen it. A late lunge down to the inside on the GT machines, and this is what you have to be careful of when you're a GT driver. That's why you need your mirrors, you need everything. Now into the pits comes Dallas Pataska, who manages to go only 32 laps on that stint, and if he's only been able to go 57 minutes on that stop, then that is screaming out splash and dash.
Yeah, he's looking short.
Yeah, go ahead, Christian. Yeah, because that's got to be a concern. Ryan Walker's also indicated he'll have to come in.
Yeah, and I think this is a big loss if you were not able to stretch it out, because the pit lane loss for a splash and dash is obviously quite extreme, and Pataska didn't have a significant enough lead to really account for that if that's what he's going to go for. Tyres is fully expected pit stop at halfway through. Definitely GT3s are not going to be able to double stint a set of tyres in this race. But we've got to keep an eye on Sean Campbell, because if he can extend out to 33 or 34, it's possible that he is actually in a commanding position in this race.
So 3 drivers in for that class, Pataska finishing. So all the teammates, actually. These are all 3 drivers who work together, working with Denny Moran and his grouping, as well with Satellite, the Miranda Sea Stars. Wachaleski still in the stall. Walker with the Satellite Racing Team Orange machine is still in the box. And they continue to watch as some of the errors continue to rumble on forward. Frank Schmitz, a lengthy stop for reference, already having some puffs of smoke from his stall. Did get off the jacks, I believe, as well, though. So the 2, I believe, may have put some fresh boots on.
And again, that will just be to try and cover off Schleray, who will be out there on fresh tyres and will be going forward. By comparison, Schleray is about 5 seconds down the road and a lap down on the leaders now. So that is certainly what has happened. You got the 2 here. Barrett leading the field over Conway at this moment in time, but a race that is by no stretch of the imagination far from over. These 2 know that they've been able to fight and fight quite cleanly. I'm just going to be really alert to the fact on when they decide that it's going to be the right time for them to make this race happen. And as we focus back on Sean Campbell here, Justin, the key is a 34th lap. And you look at that timer, he is about 1 minute and 15 seconds away from making the lane. And if he can get himself into the lane with an hour, he has got himself a huge advantage over everyone else. And I think it would then have to be up to Dallas Pataska to make up the lane transit time and how long it would take to put about 8 litres of fuel in the car.
So a very strong run, and he is clutch and coasting here, Campbell, for RSR Esports. Some great fuel saving for the 26 machine. Looks like that machine will indeed make the 1 hour mark. 30 seconds away from doing so halfway through the race. And it's using the power of 2 things. 1, knowing the knowledge to fuel save. 2, using the power of Nicolas Cage. Yes, that is Nicolas Cage.
Staggering. I have seen many helmet designs. I have seen Jorn Jens, he's got a smiley face for his helmet. Never have I seen Nicolas Cage.
And he's going again!
Well, I'm shocked that he's going to be able to make 35 laps. Well, we definitely know that he's only going to be doing 1 more stop in this race. So he now has a huge advantage over Pataska, who's either going to have to do an aggressive amount of saving on this second stint, or he's going to have to stop for that splash and dash again. And if he does elect to go for the splash and dash, that incident that we saw him have in the boot where he lost about 5 seconds, that's going to be huge in whether he wins or loses this race or not. But right now, it's totally shifted the balance towards Sean Campbell.
And you mentioned that Pataska was worried about this machine. We're now seeing the answer why. With that fuel-saving strategy, 35 laps now will be the mark. By the time around past halfway, pit stops are ongoing for the LMP2s and now some of the GT3s again. Underwood, Thomas Kopemuts, those in for the GTs. Then Pachapanti Sorenzo also just came in for the prototype side. So those P2s are also getting service with 59 minutes up on the board for the season opener. Pataska now drives on by them.
Yeah, get some credit as well to the 10 of Trevor Vavrovsky. He's done really well over the course of the stint. He's in the pits. He was just ahead of those two coming in. A driver from Club Northwest who's been in the series a very long time, but also kept very much out of trouble. And that's how you get big points in the major series. Drive your own race, stay out of trouble. The result will come to you and not the other way around.
So the Northwest driver up on the Jackson. Keep in mind this series has strong roots when it comes to the Pacific Northwest in the United States. This series originally started off, in fact, Christian, with a Northwest-centric focus in the early 2010s, and now has grown to be across the globe. Meanwhile, Sean Campbell is into the pit lane. Will this be the call heard around the sim racing world here at the Glen?
Yeah, I definitely think that this is going to be a huge advantage for him. I think he's going to come out still behind Pataska. I imagine his pace, relatively speaking, is quite slow. Obviously, Pataska was out there on new tires, Campbell on very old tires, and trying to save fuel. But it's just a huge strategic advantage to be able to go this last run of the race at completely full pace without having to worry at all about trying to save fuel. And a little further back, we saw Thomas Cope also able to kind of stretch into that second hour on fuel, so that's going to make a pretty big difference for his play for that top 3 spot, because Wasilewski and Walker both had to pit earlier, and that's going to be difficult for those guys as well. They're in the same situation as Pataska. Obviously, they all pitted at the same time, and they're all probably going to be a little bit short.
So Campbell finishing up on the jacks. Pataska has already passed on by a margin very significant. 51 seconds was Pataska's time. Campbell's taking more than a minute. Campbell, I think with the full fuel service, I think Pataska is banking on the fact he'll have to short fuel at the end of this race.
Yeah, it looks like he's committed to that then. He's not going to even attempt to stretch it. He's going to go completely full pace, make one extra stop, but bank on just being outright faster. And that's how he's going to try and win this race.
Will that be enough, though? Oh!
It will, but not in the way that we were expecting.
Tom Drayling says, enough's enough on that. Oh, my goodness.
That's disastrous for Campbell.
You do all that work, you put yourself in a strategy position where you're net on the track 8 seconds ahead of the driver behind that you're racing, and then suddenly Tom Drayling, an LMP2, spins it through turn 1, and you are a passenger. You are unsighted coming out of the pits, and you have no way of predicting that incident happening. That is what you call bad break of 2022, and we're only 2.5 weeks into it.
And the only thing I could think of that was happening there was it almost looked like Tom Drayling, Christian, was trying to move out of the way of the 07 at the wrong time.
Yeah, I don't think he knew that the Ferrari was coming out of the pit lane there, and he was trying to make way for the LMP that was trying to lap him. And unfortunately, GT car was just coming out, and it's three into an area where it's typically not wide enough for 3 in the first place. Just extremely unfortunate for Sean Campbell.
And we talk about this as well here, Justin, how you need to have your eyes on the swivel at Watkins Glen when you're dealing with traffic. As he's gone around for another time, Tom Drayling is really pretty much sick as a parrot with the way that LMP2 has been running around today. But you have to be so alert, and you cannot at any point in time just switch off and not look at the black box relative here in iRacing. You have to be alert to a car coming out of the pits like that. And ultimately, that is just a case of a driver not being alert to surroundings. And you know what? At the end of it all, it was really not deserved for Campbell, who'd driven an absolutely flawless race at that point in time.
Absolutely staggering. As some more troubles here with the 10 machine. This is Trevor's car. This is one of the blue machines once again, with some trouble, some front end damage on that car. In fact, yes, because they met a tire barrier in the outer loop, with the result of a side swipe from the 7.
He didn't meet the tires. He just met the LMP2, who just gets a little bit too narrow there to Schlerate, moving on by. And Vavrovsky will feel very hard done by that. He's lucky he didn't actually collect a second LMP2 there on the rejoin back onto circuit, but that is just how quickly this track can really affect you, and how drivers, when they feel like they've got a line and use all of the room available. That's 2 GT3 cars that have gone in the space of about 2 minutes, and into the pits there you can see Schleray is down there on the jacks now.
By the way, the race leaders are currently in the midst of their pit stops for those P2s currently. And this is now coming in from their team manager, in fact. They are saying right now they are not battling those top two at all right now, guys. They've mentioned that racing and engineering per the plan. So those swaps we've seen, as expected, are a part of that plan, Christian. That should be expected with those discussions where if you're trying to control a tempo of field, you want to be in sync, and it seems that team is in sync.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they've totally got the race under control, especially with kind of the misfortune that happened to some of the faster drivers that were in the battle for third. So it makes sense to just kind of run as a pair, and if you've got an agreement that you're kind of going to just flip-flop the lead, then, you know, why not do it? But it definitely looks more racy, I would say, to us than perhaps it must feel to them when they're actually kind of doing that.
Here's my interesting mark, though. I think you just noticed this too, Jake. Conway took a 7-second shorter stall than Barrett. They're now not on the same page after their cycle here.
Absolutely, but on top of that as well, the key word in that statement that was made by the team was the words, for now, which means that for now, right now they're second, they're not battling, and that's absolutely fine and expected to be seen and expected to be heard. The difference maker is going to be at this point of the race, will they battle later on?
Well, they did say, this is EJ Fulner specifically, mentioning by the end, they will race to victory, to specifically say the exact quotation there. Castles, by the way, did make it 23 laps, is just pit in, coming up to 51 minutes to go. So Banfield is currently getting his first laps of the day today in the 777 with that pit window. Cordell Colon is also in for service in the number 50. Meanwhile, a mad battle is starting to take place involving some of the GT3s. How about 2x2? This is a run for Ryan Walker underneath Thomas Cope. Cope hits him towards the back bumper. Walker with the clear either way. This time coming out of the boot.
Good battling here from the Olympics car. Couldn't quite get there though, and Ryan Walker, beautiful overtake, gets the move done. They've got a bit of LMP2 trying to get through behind. They're trying as well to stick with Wasilewski, who is there in the 86. They go through. Traffic's going to take the long road and dice in underneath to get back through. So it's Antonio Navarro in the 99, who is 15th at this point in time. They get through without any troubles at all, but it just keeps piling up because just behind it's 999 and Miguel Freitas, who's a lap down in this race, trying to chase along. So he'll move to the inside. One will go through. He'll have to be patient, go to the outside. And that's probably one of the toughest skills that you'll have through this section of track, is getting on the wrong side of 2 or 3 out there on circuit. It can really throw you through a loop.
You know who also just got thrown through a loop nearly to the other portions of the track? Nick Sigley. He was just trying to pass around Dallas Pataska. Pataska hugged the inside coming out of the boot. Sigley nearly ran over to the short chute for the NASCAR portion of the road course. So the 333 losing a bit of time with Pataska still keeping an eye on the battle. Meanwhile, a little bit of diciness with Thomas Cope. Having a prototype nearly come across, and now Cope nearly comes across Walker's left rear.
I wouldn't want to be here, and I'm pretty sure, Christian, you wouldn't want to be driving in this GT3 field today with just how aggressive everyone's been today.
Yeah, there's absolutely no give or take really going on at all as far as I can see. And I'm actually a bit surprised that Cope's fighting this as much as he is, because if I understand the strategy correctly, Cope doesn't need a pit, whereas the two ahead of him are going to be very tight on fuel, and they're probably going to have to make that splash and dash. So I'm a bit confused why he's fighting as much, because all he needs to do is sit with them, and he's in a commanding position to take the second spot. He just doesn't want to let them get away, but they're going to have to build a huge margin on him if they're going to be able to make that splash and dash. And as we saw with Pataska, and unfortunately we didn't get to see it play out with Sean Campbell, but it looked like it was going to be very, very difficult to do that.
Yeah, some very tight moments there, to say the very least. They've now spread apart since then. Walker Still staying within the draft, though, a little bit of Wachowski as the 07 of Gueros has now come in for a scheduled stop. 22 laps they went with under 31 to go this time for some of the prototypes estimated. So the window's open for the prototypes for the second stops, it looks like, for a majority of the drivers. It's just been a matter of what lap they can go the furthest to. And right now at this mark, based on the current clip being pushed around by some of the top drivers today, it's going to be a tight window for the last time, possibly. Some of these drivers may be within a lap or two of getting towards the end on the two-stop.
They certainly are, and we are seeing that in play at this point in time, as well as we see the battle going on between Melnarovic and Bram Reniers out there on circuit. So car 69 versus car number 8. It is the 69 ahead of the 8 at this point in time, but that BMW has been pretty good, and something we haven't really talked about here today, Justin, has been the GT3 balance of performance. It was a car by World Championship standards that had itself a World Championship run back when Blancpain sponsored the series. Then that moved over by measure of metric away from this sort of car, and this has effectively been the VCO World Tour style car that you can jump in and have yourself a very good ability to race. And I would say, in terms of the iRacing service, probably the most race category out there overall.
We haven't talked much about that BOP today. Christian, you seem to be the best person to answer that. How would you describe that today for these cars?
Oh man, we're really putting me on the spot with a BOP question on a broadcast.
Yes.
Okay. We'll go with this. So yeah, obviously the BMW is a very, very good car. It is essentially the most modern GT3 that there currently is, and obviously it didn't race real world last year at all. It was essentially a development year, and it's going to be racing officially, should we say, for the first time in 2022. And I mean, there's even public statements from BMW on this, that the car is essentially built to be as difficult as possible to BOP. And you can see that if you just put the car alongside others in the class. It's for one, it's a very, very long car, and especially if you compare to, say, cars from even 2 to 3 years ago in terms of an aerodynamic sense, it is a massively game-changing car for GT3s. I think there's absolutely no doubt about that, and I think it's going to prove to be very, very difficult to BOP in real life, as difficult as really it's been to BOP in a virtual sense. And it kind of has some inherent advantages and maybe some inherent disadvantages depending on the circumstances that kind of contribute to that. Especially, obviously, we talked about aero-wise a little bit and the length of the car, and it just makes it a very, very stable platform in high-speed corners especially. So somewhere like Watkins Glen, with the exception of, say, the corner off the boot here, it's naturally very well suited to. Even other tracks such as, say, Bathurst, where it's mostly long flowing corners. I know it's obviously difficult across the mountain and whatnot, but it's mostly flowing corners. It's very well suited to those environments. Same again for somewhere such as Spa. And I think in terms of where the iRacing BOP is for GT3, I'm obviously biased towards this because it's essentially my project and my kind of work for the past year and a little bit. I think it's the best that we've ever had it so far. I'm not saying that we can't improve it further, because I believe that we can. But as we can see here, we had Pataska, who was leading in the Porsche. We had Campbell, who was running second very competitively in the Ferrari. Obviously, across the service, we tend to see drivers using the Audi, the Lamborghini, the BMW. I think for the vast majority of people, the BOP is in a very, very good place right now. And you can confidently pick any of the cars that you would like and be pretty assured that you're going to be able to compete in the majority of races with whichever car you would like to run. And that's, I would say, my stance on where we are for BOP right now.
By the way, the BOP was released for the 24 hours endurance race for Daytona International Speedway special event next week. Guess which cars didn't get the BOP? The BMW, the McLaren, the Ferrari. Some were... Yes.
I can add a little bit to this as well. So, in the context of BOP, there are other advantages and disadvantages with cars that you have to account for that may not be immediately apparent in terms of hot lap pace. I know everybody likes to judge things a lot on hot lap pace, but you've got to remember that the BOPs for endurance events are based on how the car runs over a full fuel run, how the car is going to work its tires beyond that full fuel run in case there's double stinning, triple stinning and whatnot of tires. And that's where you've kind of got to look at sort of how the BOP projects out into those ranges. So sometimes you might think a car has a little bit of an unfair penalty applied to it. In the case where you think the penalty might be a little bit much for the hot lap pace, it's probably because it's a very strong car on long run, and that's how it's set up. So just keep that in mind and try not to take, especially special event BOP at face value. It's certainly, there's always a lot of time invested into those. And we'll continue to keep doing that in the future.
43 minutes on the clock, and the pit window, by the way, has finished up for some of the prototypes, but there are massively varying differences for some of the drivers. Travis Henderson still has to take a stop for a second time, likely in a window to make it on a 2-stop fully. Conway, Barrett seem to be committed to the 3-stop. Charlotte may have to, looks like, be on the 3. And several more are starting to blink their lights in the midst of battles, such as David Sorenzo. So we have a mixed bag for everything here. Banfield is amongst those would appear, Jake, to be going for the 2-stop.
Absolutely, and you look at the battle that's going on here. You got Soranzo, you got Queros there. Queros cannot get a break at that bus stop. Again, having to be really, really aggressive at side-by-side there with David Soranzo there, the Frenchman. And you start looking around now at what do you need to do? They've got this battle that they're coming up to that we've spent the last couple of laps looking at here, which is, of course, Melnarovic versus Reniers. And through there are all going to go these three. And now you're going to start looking at this going, okay, what do we need to do? We need to build a gap. Well, how do we build a gap? Well, you just got to drive faster. And this is one of the things around this circuit, and especially in a car as downforce dependent as an LMP2, the faster you go, the more downforce you have.
Exactly, and we're seeing some of that experience showcasing itself with the best of the best drivers when it comes to the pace. There's a reason there's a Team 1, 2, 3 on the racetrack for these P2s today. Of note, Reniers has had to come to the pit lane again after 30 laps. The 8 machine, Henderson, has taken the pit stop for the 24. So the window has fully closed for those respective drivers, but now it's going to be the matter of where everyone cycles out. 40 minutes to determine how things go, 41 to be precise. Not going to be the easiest race, especially since the race lead difference is now 8 seconds. The 42 of Conway has a massive buffer, 1:31.8, the time's being recorded by the leaders.
It's very stagnant, though, and this is the key here to this race. These two are very stagnant. We were talking about a 7 to 8 second gap when it came to the pit stop. If it stays like this, and we're going to see that 7 to 8 seconds go back the other way at the final stop of the race, then we're going to have a close race for the victory. And I think that's what we're seeing right now, is that we have a strategy up until the final pit stop. Anything outside the final pit stop, it's fair game. We're not going to get involved. We're not going to interfere. And for car 42 and car 024, you could say that both of them have driven a pretty professional and solid race out there in a car that they, by their measure of metric, were supposed to dominate and have been dominating over the course of this race. All they've got to do is make sure that they convert this and make sure they get the finish that they want out of a race like this. This is not easy to win, a 2-hour race here at Watkins Glen, and they're putting on an absolute show today, bringing out the very, very best of what they're capable of doing.
They definitely have been when it comes to this pace, indeed. It has gone down a little bit with some of the traffic of note, with 024 picking up a couple tenths this time around. Meanwhile, the adventures of Tom Drowling continue. More smoke kicked up for the 11 machine, more problems, and it seems like Tom is really struggling, Christian, unfortunately, with the corner exits. He's had to lock it up several dozen times on corner exit.
Yeah, the LMP2 can be a little bit unforgiving, I meant to say there, at corner exit, especially on power down. And, you know, the tip of the boot is traditionally a corner that has caught people out in the past with kind of inside spins and whatnot in that putting the power down sort of area, and just having to have too much wheel in at the same time and overwhelming the rears and spinning to the inside. I have noticed that on the updated and repaved version of this track, I've been seeing that happen a lot less than I used to see, but it is still a tricky corner, and obviously in the LMP2, it's a downforce car, and it has all the downforce until it doesn't. And that can really, really catch you out very easily. So you just got to be careful with it. And obviously for Tom, he's having a little bit of a time, shall we say, this race.
Indeed has, and for some other drivers, they've had some solid times trying to recover. Take, for example, Gabriel Ruse, we're now seeing on screen. The 323, Jake. Remember, was involved in a lot of craziness early. Is now 17th overall and in class, and is trying to close in to Travis Henderson.
Certainly is, and you'd say right now that what you need to do is very, very simple. Just settle down, get into a rhythm, and just focus on the car in front. Gabriel Ruse's last lap was a 1:31.9. You compare that to Travis Henderson, this will be his first representative lap time. It was a 2:43 lane-to-lane time and around the lap, so it's going to be very difficult to work out. It's about 8 seconds, I'd say, the gap is at this point in time. You'll see him at the bottom end of the straight. It was a 34.6, his first lap, with real implications. So I'd say right now, Gabriel Ruse is light years quicker, but he is a lap down, and he is going to be relying on a couple drivers, maybe Sangali, maybe Sidgley, as being a little bit slower and giving that opportunity to jump maybe a couple places between now and the end of this race.
You see the difference between Henderson and Ruse, still fairly substantial. Ruse all the way back at the start of the inner loop. In the outer loop now, Travis Henderson for reference. There is Ruse specifically. Ruse for reference. Lap times right now running 1:31.8. Henderson last time a 1:34.6. Had a bit of troubles last time around, but the normal pace for Henderson has been on average in the 1:34s in general, after the pit stop sequence for the 24. So we'll see how that plays out. Now estimated 24 to go for the P2s this time around, under 37 minutes to go on the clock. One of the closer battles also on track is starting to build up a bit for 10th on track as well, Jake. Hashimi has fallen back towards that mark. That's where the 011 machine, where we've seen that machine so quick in practice, is currently settled in.
Yeah. Maximilian Senna-Munna, who didn't have the best qualifying, has just been keeping himself to himself in 11th position. It's not been, I would say, the race I was predicting him to have, but this is still solid. If you can beat the number that you start on the grid, you've definitely done a good job. And being up in 11th place, I'm not going to turn that away in terms of points. He's been driving very solidly, and I would say almost invisible-like, and that's sort of the best compliment that you can have in a race like this. If there's no cameras on you at any point in time and people like us aren't talking about you, that means you're doing a good job. The moment that we start to talk about people quite a bit out there in a race, then that's trouble, because then you're getting yourself involved in certain things here and there. What I'd absolutely love to see is a driver, for example, Alexander Thieb would be the comparison in the sim racing world. You don't really need to talk about them too much because they're just getting on, doing a job, and they'll get a good result out of it.
That's one of the main methods, indeed, drivers have to take when it comes to these endurance races. Now that grouping is still separated by about 5 car lengths, and our grouping is also starting to close up a little bit. You mentioned Sidgley, for example. Right now, that machine's battling with Sangali for 14th position as well. Freitas and Drelling are also close to each other for position. Here's a look at the battle for 14th now. Sangali makes the pass. Sidgley now drops on back. This is right in front of the overall leader, and Conway forced to the curb.
Wow. You don't get that close too often. And Jamie Conway had to be really, really aggressive if he wants to get it done. Ideally, that door was being closed as he was going through into turn number 2 there. And I think Christian has a better insight as that as a driver. How important is it in that sort of situation to just commit to an idea and see it through to the end?
Well, I think for Conway, he doesn't really have a choice. I think we are at that point now where the front two are definitely racing, and we've we talked about that gap of about 7 to 8 seconds in the pit stop between Conway and Barrett. And you think he wouldn't have lost a second there by sitting behind, but you know, he would have lost a couple of tenths or whatnot, and it's going to make a difference towards the end of the race. So I can totally understand why he was fully committing to the inside there, and you know, he is the race leader, and the blue flag will have been displayed before then. So I think he kind of had every right to sort of make that pass the way that he did.
33 minutes to go on the clock. Frank Schmidt, by the way, would likely be the first of the drivers in the prototypes who would have to come down for the pit stop. Then you also have Soranzo, Navarro, Asciponti, who would have to come in fairly early for reference. So that is a mark of what to consider here. The 7 also has to come in fairly early, approaching the 20th lap this time by on their respective stint.
I mean, I think it's totally up in the air, 4th on back in the LMP class, because we've just basically seen everybody shuffling around the whole time. I mean, Hashimi's back there in 10th. We saw him up there in the top 5. You got drivers who've kind of gone the other way. Quiros has made an astonishing recovery, really. At one point, he was backwards into the wall, and now he's running in 6th. But I've got to think that he's going to have to take a longer pit stop at some point, and that's going to cycle him back again.
Pataska's in.
So the pit stop is in. The window is now opened up for the GT3s. Remember, Pataska took less fuel, Christian, knowing that the extra stop had to be in play for the 23. Fast repair is now used. Pataska in for service.
Yeah, and I think this is pretty much a foregone conclusion right now for Pataska. The 2 drivers behind him, both Wasilewski and Walker, are kind of on the same strategy as he is, and he's got a substantial advantage pace-wise over Cope. So, unfortunately, with the demise of Campbell, it's kind of taken the strategy race out of it for the GT3s here, and this should be pretty plain sailing, I would say, for Pataska to the end.
Service is completed. Will that indeed be the case? Well, it's the case by about a quarter of the racetrack. Pataska with a wide margin that's still around 24 seconds or so, make it 25 for the corner exit for the pit lane. Pataska now finished service. 23 now just needs to keep it clean for another 31.5 minutes. Speaking of drivers trying to stay clean, there's Wasilewski trying to stay out of the way that time of Gabriel Ruse. 86 has broken the draft of the teammate, in fact, at this point, Jake. Walker is now more than a second back.
That's crucial at this point in time. You know, you've got to build the gap. You've got to give yourself some room. And Wasilewski has done such a great job so far in this race to just build that gap, learn from the mistake he made in the early stages of the race, and very iRacing-like colours as he drives up through into the bus stop once again. All about building. If you can give yourself a couple seconds, that is absolutely massive when it comes to a pit stop. It gives you leeway if you miss your pit box, for example, or if, for example, you just miss your pit limiter. And that is another spinner out there, and that is Cordell Cologne once again finding out what makes turn number 1 very difficult.
It's been a rough day for the Grizzly TFR machines. Remember those blue machines, very well known last season for being in the contention for the team side, Christian. Not been the case today, though.
Yeah, and we were kind of used to them sort of filling out a whole grid, really, with those blue-colored cars, and it definitely seems like we've got a reduction in number of those now, and, well, they won last year, but it's definitely not been the start to the season they would have wanted.
Yeah, most of the drivers, unfortunately, towards the back half of the respective classes. The 10 has been inside 7th spot for a good while. Tom Dreiling has had a roller coaster of emotions today. Cordell Cologne, a couple different trouble spots. Here's the look at 8th again. This is still staying close because here comes more with the pole this time of the draft. Hashimi trying to defend 1 car length back as the 011.
This is a good scrap between these two, and the 011 has just been very patient, waiting on the back of Kamal Hashimi, hoping that there is a mistake somewhere. Same class lap traffic in front, of course, in the form of Cordell Cologne. So the work is certainly there, to try and get this move done. But there's also this great equaliser. They got the draft. They've also got Handsome Pete Harrod just in front. So this is not going to be easy. And as they all check up into the 90, now this is going to be a mad Texas scramble here in New York, which is the weirdest thing that you'd ever hear, a Texas scramble in New York. As they go up through the SS section, they got the first part of that done pretty nicely. There's more traffic on the horizon as they go through. Now you've just got to pick your lane because this is going to be so difficult here. Muller's got a fantastic chance to get close, but he's going to take the more patient route and say, I'd rather just get through the traffic first.
Especially since Cologne was starting to clip the grass there, in fact, into the inner loop. A little bit dicey there as Cologne actually clipped it again in the outer loop. One driver has come in for pit stop service, the 150. Fascipanti is now in for a stop. So that will open up the LMP2 window. Well, these drivers coming in this time to keep on pushing. Keep in mind, there are two different strategies in play here too, Jake, because the 0-11, 17 coming to 18 laps in the stint this time. Hashmi, 11 laps in this time.
Certainly is. And Hashimi's definitely got the advantage then. Can go a little bit later, take less fuel at the final stop. And with this being inside the final 30 minutes now, inside 28 minutes, you now start to think about, okay, what do I need to do in this race to get things going and to get things sorted? And just looking at how you get this race sorted, I want to talk about car 42 for a second because Jamie Conway has just put a beautiful 32.9 down on the board. Yes, he's lost 0.2 of a second to Chris Barrett, but over the course of the laps that have been done by Barrett over the course of this race, his last 5 laps, 32.2, 32.5, 31.8, 33.1 with traffic, and a 32.7. You compare that to Conway, he's been a lot more consistent, 31.7, 32.2, 31.9, 31.9, 32.9, and then that last lap was a 31.6 as he meets on the exit then of pit lane Theo Schleret. So you now start to say, in terms of this race and how it stacks up, it's 10.5 seconds. We were talking about a 7-second split. He's found 3.5 seconds in this area of race, and you cannot argue the fact that if you can find 3 seconds out there on track, you are doing something absolutely fantastic.
It's been an absolutely fantastic drive for a reason from Conway. So we'll have to keep an eye on how this fares out, though, once they have to come in for the expected third and final stop for them of this race. Keep in mind, we haven't talked too much about Hashimi in the background for that machine that's still in the midst of this battle. Keep in mind, started as a hobby just a year and a half ago, runs mainly this car, goes to school full-time after spending 5 years in the Marine Corps, and had originally just started doing 4-hour Nürburgring Nordschleife races. Decided then, okay, it's time to get more respect and closer competition. Found this respective group when it was being organized, and now race a lot together in terms of the 24-hour and 12-hour endurance races. So a decent start to the year for the 37, who has been as high as the top 5 today and is now starting to pull away, in fact, for more.
Sometimes that's all you need to do. Pull away, give yourself that gap, give yourself that momentum, and it's just a couple tenths of a second here and there. It's a much smoother run through the bus stop, and ultimately it's giving himself that room and that ability to move as in comes Jamie Conway from the race lead.
So the window is now up for these drivers, the top 2, who will be able to get the edge here. Chris Barrett now back in the race lead. Barrett, 19 laps into their stint. Conway just took an 18-lap stint. So we'll see how long Conway stays in the pit box for reference marks compared to this machine. Here's the thing, Barrett's about to reach a ton of traffic and now has to drive on the outside of the traffic, in fact. Interclass traffic in front, in fact. With Quirrell's up the road, 24.8. Meanwhile, in the pit lane, just taken from Conway.
You have to say, and Christian, I'm sure you can jump in on that, if you find lap traffic at the wrong time during a race, and this is on probably the most crucial lap of the race for Chris Barrett, this race depended on this lap being clean. It's not for Chris Barrett, and you'd probably say he's cost himself about a second in comparison to fresh tyres and a new splash and dash to get yourself home.
Yeah, and I have to think that that probably played into Conway's decision to pit at the end of that lap. he might have been able to run a little bit further, but you know, when you see a big group of cars that you're going to have to come up on, and he's actually still battling his way through a little bit of lap traffic now, but nothing like what he would have been in had he gone another lap there. So I've got to think that that's part of that decision, and that we shouldn't really expect Barrett to come in for maybe 3 to 4 laps, I would guess at minimum, or unless he runs into another large gaggle of traffic.
So that run keeps on going. Pataska, speaking of gaggles, is a part of one. He does have damage again, though, we're hearing, and it's even worse than the last time. What's happened to Pataska? I think he may have just ran to the back end of an LMP2, and guess which one?
Oh, he's just avoided another incident with Dryling, and if it is Dryling again, you can see back end steps out. Yeah, you're a passenger there. There's no way you're getting out of that one. It's a committed and loaded corner down here into the left-hander of the chute. You can see the back steps out. He's got nowhere to go. And it's the sort of incident where the back steps out that you're unsighted. You don't expect a car to lose the back end through the chute, especially through the middle of the chute where you've got most of the downforce working on the car. And as such, if you got damage now, this is going to be a very, very long end to the race for Dallas Pataska. The good news is he's got half a minute to Ryan Walker here, who at this stage is doing pretty much exactly what is needed at the moment. I think Pataska's safe from this point onwards, but it's going to be a nervy last 22 minutes to get himself home.
Tom Dryling has now gotten a black flag from that incident, by the way, and the second one referred to by Jake was he spun again in the middle of the corner exit and parked at the bottom of the racetrack for about 15 seconds to get going. Not a good start to a season once more for the 11. Sengali has also come in for scheduled stops. A few more, such as Smith, have also taken stops this time, as well as Queros. Pataska still has a big advantage. That's the plus side. 34 seconds up over Ryan Walker, who is yet to try and have to splash in. The reason that Walker's in second, by the way, Wasilewski had to take the splash and go, Jake.
Certainly did, and I wouldn't want to be Wasilewski right now, because look at what 4-car scrap he's got himself into, and now trying to work a way through Travis Henderson. It's going to get through. Cope's now going to have to play defensive here as he tries to battle with that Lamborghini as he goes through the Porsche on the outside, and leading on each other in towards this big right-left here of the bus stop. That was the last thing really that Wasilewski wanted to deal with, and now more traffic.
Handsome Pete has joined the fun too here. Remember, Monerwich and Handsome Pete collided earlier. Monerwich parks into the bottom. Everyone's staggering. Handsome Pete elected to let Fasciaponte go to the inside. Monerwich did not. Monerwich now checks up in front. Fasciaponte dives to the inside. The 71 dives underneath Harad. Handsome Pete now dives back to the outside. Now all the prototypes finally got a space. None of them made it easy, though. All of them on different calls there. Cope now gets hit. Hit from behind by Wasilewski. Wasilewski goes for the cross.
Could just see that happening a mile away, and I tell you what, that will give every reason for Thomas Cope to jump back to the inside again, try and pick it off, but it'll be a better run on the exit, and you've got the LMP2 trying to funnel all the way through, and that's Miguel Freitas, but ultimately Wasilewski gets the move done, and you had to say the moment that Cope decided he wanted to defend in that Lamborghini was the moment that contact was going to happen.
Pit stop underway meanwhile for Chris Barrett, so the window for that 024 is now seeing them take service. Conway has passed him. Conway is up in front despite a 2-second quicker stop for Chris Barrett. So Conway has built up a buffer of more than 5 seconds. Looking still at that traffic meanwhile. Wasilewski letting by some of it, but Monerwich and Harrod are still not backing down.
You're going to drive yourself into a box like this. Harrod has to back out of it. And, you know, this is where you have to just start being alert. And, you know, you've got a great eye on this, Christian. How alert do you have to be? And how do you tackle a 4-car train now, a 3-car train? Do you think of the big picture, or are you trying to eat it off in chunks?
I think normally my approach is to kind of let everybody break themselves apart and then pick them off one at a time, but I can understand why Cope was as aggressive with his defense as he was on Wasilewski there, because they're essentially on the same strategy to the end of the race now, and for Cope, that's pretty much second place is gone now, and obviously the drivers behind are kind of in the same boat, so this is a real battle for second. It's third now because Wasilewski's escaped a little bit, but it was a big grouping for second, and Cope just doesn't look like he's got the tires underneath him to get him to the end to not lose more positions here. He's going to fight it for everything he's got, though.
Side by side still, Cope nearly making contact once more. A lot of dartingness and craziness in this grouping still, but Cope now drops on back once more. Cope is back to 5th. Cope is really struggling, nearly into the safer barrier. Handsome Pete moves up to the top 5, +7, near contact by Cope.
Watching Cope over these last couple of laps has been like watching a driver drive through quicksand instead of everyone else, because the tyres have just been the worst best friend that I think you could possibly have for Car 64. There's not much you can do in this sort of situation. You're trying to hold on, but ultimately everybody else is in a better position. Thomas Cope now to the back of that group, and you'd say at this point of the race, as the traffic goes through, you're relying on a little bit of help from divine intervention, I think, to bring yourself into a position to battle, to race, and hopefully to get yourself some very solid points. And you know what? He's still going to try the inside here against Pete Harrod. Harrod's having absolutely none of it, though. He had the line perfectly through the carousel.
These drivers for this class estimated 10 laps to go, this time under 20 minutes, now coming up to 17 minutes this time around as well on the clock. And Cope, for the past 5 laps, running 148.3s. Last time a 148.1. Keep in mind the drivers in front of the 147s. That's how much the fall off has come in, and that, keep in mind, is with some traffic management as well as Hashimi drives on by. And that now brings to the other side of the coin when it comes to the P2s right now, Jake. Banfield and Hashimi appear to be committed to trying the 2-stop. Wolf is close on that mark as well. Most of the field other than that is trying the 3.
And so the question is, how quick are you in the 2 compared to the 3? Rui Queiroz will be interesting, and that is a very, very damaged Lamborghini going through the bus stop, and that is not ideal for Bram Reniers in the number 8, whose car looks tea and totaled.
So Bram has found a BAM with the safer barrier, making that car now inside the jam. And it's again the inner loop, a factor, and this time it was the help of the curbing.
Oh, we're going to have a look here. First curb, he gets there, car comes completely unsettled, and that's something that often isn't talked about when it comes to losing the car. And Christian, you have a huge idea on what happens on iRacing. How important has compression damping been to iRacing, and how these cars all react and battle with each other if there's another bit of contact there?
Yeah, as we see there, Sean Campbell did return to the track, but unfortunately another incident with the P2 has sent him for a little bit of a spin, but kind of no more harm than it's already done to his race being out of it. But yeah, the curbing, there was actually a little bit of a discussion within our own team in terms of how LMP2s got through the bus stop versus, say, the GT3s, and the feeling for us was that it was actually much harder to get through the bus stop in a GT3 than it was in an LMP2. The opinion was that the LMP2 just kind of glides over the curb, whereas the GT3, I mean, I'm running the Porsche, and that first curb, it's the jump. It's not, you know, like running over the curb. It's literally launching the car pretty much over it entirely, and the landing is pretty severe. And I have to say, I'm not too surprised that we saw it was a Lamborghini having an issue there, because that car is traditionally a bit more to the twitchy side of things, especially in kind of those unsettling moments. So yeah, that's, you know, we talked about BOP earlier, and it's one of the areas where the Ferrari has traditionally been very, very strong over curbing, whereas a car such as the Lamborghini is less so. So it's a difficult one, because you will, where you gain in some areas with damping and whatnot is an area that you're going to gain, lose in others. But certainly curb strikes is pretty much all high-speed stuff. So if you want any tips on kind of tuning that, yeah, high-speed compression, high-speed rebound. Low speed is all about body control and kind of direction change. So that will help you after you've landed, but it's the high speed that you need to focus on for the actual curb strike itself.
Still, I think some of the setup builders are trying to take notes here at this point, because there's been some very informative stuff that is extremely master's and PhD level degree knowledge basis from Christian Challenger. Once more, let's put it out.
We are definitely not PhD level. I did not go that far with my studies, but yeah, I mean, you know, I'm on Discord. If anybody ever wants to ask me questions, you know where to find me.
Insert 25. Go ahead.
Sorry, I've just noticed here, Justin, that second is catching first right now, and third is catching second. This could, in the final 13 minutes, make this very, very dicey.
And I believe that's in regards to the prototypes too. Conway's gap is reducing. Chris Barrett is on it, and then some. This gap was more than 6 seconds just a couple laps ago.
Makes you wonder, is he fuel saving? Has he underfueled the car? Because we were talking about how he took an extra 7 seconds advantage and only lost 2 at the stop. I wonder if he's underfueled the car and he's tried to be really, really aggressive with that to bring himself home.
Definitely sounds that way. Like he
look at that.
1 or 2 laps short.
Yeah, that's going to be a major concern. Look at that. Nearly a full second alone last time. 3/10 the prior time. Before that, 4/10.
You can see it on the back of frame. They're just sitting there waiting. Chris Barrett, he knows that he's just got to pick off cars one at a time. You can see it's visible how that gap is closing at the moment, and Barrett is driving absolutely fantastically. The gap now under 4 seconds for the first time in a long time. And I think Conway's got to bring on the afterburners. It's 12.5 minutes here between now and the end of the race. He brings the gap back to 4 seconds because Conway had to get past both Pataska and David H. Baker, and this might just be a game of how does traffic play ball. It doesn't for Conway. He has to get well out of it then, going through the S's to avoid what is Trevor Pavlovsky in the Lamborghini.
Barrett might be able to take advantage of that. Still has to navigate around that car, though, by a significant margin. Still having to close up that 4 seconds. Conway now in the inner loop. Coming up to 7 estimated laps to go. Under 12 minutes now on the clock. And in regards to traffic, keep in mind, they've got a lot of it coming up. And a lot of it, too, Christian, which will be the tough thing, is interclass traffic. Yes, there's a lot of prototypes up the road.
Yeah, definitely is not going to be easy for these guys, especially if Conway's got to save some fuel as well. And at the moment, it looks like it's stabilized a little bit around that 4 second mark, but we'll have to see if Barrett can run him down even more. I suspect he's going to. It's actually just coming down to 3.6, so definitely momentum is swung towards Barrett. And you got to think, there's a point where short fuel in the car, okay, yep, you're going to gain an instantaneous advantage, but towards the end of the race, you want to be able to run at full pace. You don't want to be worrying about whether you got enough fuel to make it to the end. And that might have been a little bit of a misstep from Conway, because I feel like the pace was actually in his court in the last run.
It almost looks like he's trying to use Vachipani to save. Banfield has not been able to save. The 777 has had to take a third pit stop. Take Banfield out of the conversation for the race win.
It was a great effort by him, and car in the wall. That's Chalaret, who had been up as high as third in the race, and his car finds itself teetotaled as the leaders now go through the area, which their teammate has pretty much smoked out like a barbecue joint.
And unfortunately, indeed, that car is cooking. After that incident, the 7 spun around in the inner loop as well. There was pressure from behind with the battle with Wolf. No contact, though. Watch the second part.
Yeah, they just get some air up on the rear tyres, and then when the tyres find that contact patch again, you get that massive influx of grip, which wants to throw the car as the car doesn't know what to do with all of the torque. And that's a car that's not looking too proper and dandy. That's Miguel Freitas.
Remember, was involved in that big incident early on in this one, was a laps down, and another mistake this time. The run coming out of the chute, clipped the grass, smacked the inside wall, significant damage for the 999. The lead is back up to 4 seconds, by the way. Doing the 42 and 0.24. 6 estimated to go at the stripe.
You'd think at this point in time, though, that if that gap is extending out once again between Conway and Barrett, that it's staying around 4 seconds. Conway's just about stabilized it, and you can see Conway, he has really turned it up. Look at that, he was doing 33s, lap 68, lap 69 was a 32.8, and then he's just done a 31.9 to say, you know what, I am going to have to go quicker here. And it makes you wonder as well here, how much was he fuel saving through 66, 67, 68, and has he hit his number here in the final 10 minutes?
Hashimi has also not been able to make it on a 2-stop. All the 2-stoppers have not been able to do so. So every driver in that class, now 3 stops. The 37 has now lost several spots with an 11-second pit stop. Quiros is now up to 3rd after being involved in trouble earlier. Another car is off. It's another tow for Bram Reniers.
Well, that's not ideal, and I believe, Christian, you had a better eye on what happened. I believe he just come out of the pits trying to assess how much damage was on that car, try and see if there's a finish, but didn't look like it was happening.
Yeah, it looked like he'd obviously already had that incident that we covered, and then he was trying to just get it to the end on what looked like just required repairs, but obviously decided it was too much and has made the decision to park the car.
Ryan Walker has had to make the decision to splash the car. And that means Walker is out of the top 5. In fact, the top 4. Ryan Walker couldn't make it on the 1 stop. Only 2 drivers are in that window. Malnerwich, Handsome Pete. More drivers with some not-so-handsome battling going on. Little dicey again. That's Conway passing lap traffic in Cologne and Wasilewski.
You don't want to go 3 wide at any point in this race, but for Jamie Conway, that was... Oh, spinner in front of him. Oh, my goodness me. And was that Cologne there?
Yes, it was.
He had that moment. My goodness.
Right in front of the 2nd place car and Chris Barrett.
Well, you can't write script like this. You had to get well through and around. That pretty much will decide it, but I tell you what, you've got to give some credit here to Barrett. He didn't slow down at all. He's still got the gap under 3 seconds.
Yeah, he gained time doing that. He picked up some time trying to dodge that somehow. So that could have been massive for that battle for the race win. Instead, Barrett keeps his foot in it after this.
Well, here's how it's going to work. I spin the car, I hit the barriers, ambulance hit 60. Not ideal at all in the circumstances from car number 50, but somehow that was avoided. He was spread eagle across the middle of the road, and you cannot write how that could have been a race-ending incident. You can see Barrett has struggled a little bit in the final stage of the lap. He's got that gap down a little bit here at this point in time, not by much. It's 3.4 seconds, but I think old father time here is just started to creep in. 6 minutes, that's there or thereabouts 4 laps. And you got to take out, what, 0.8 of a second a lap?
It's going to be hard, but you never know with how this race has gone, where that time may fall and lay. Freitas may have the chance to be that freight train that holds up Conway at the traffic light at the train crossing. Speaking of drivers battling, Blinky Blinky, it's time for Handsome Pete to move around.
Yeah, this has been a real recovery, actually, from both Pete and Malneritz. This is actually a legitimate fight for 3rd place in the race. We thought those drivers were kind of out of it. We saw them having issues early on. Pete all the way back in 10th for a majority of the race. And now it's looking like they've been able to play this strategy out to do it only on 1 stop, and that they're going to be able to fight for this 3rd spot. Now, Ryan Walker had to make that splash. He's 8 seconds behind, so he's not going to close that gap unless these 2 have to pit.
And these drivers are already about 30, 31 laps into their respective stints for reference. It's going to even be tight, mind you, for that lap mentioned, Christian, to make it on 34. They'd have to go about 35, 36.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be real interesting to see if they do have to pit or not. But if they can pull this off, though, this will be a huge result for both drivers here, because they really were not having the greatest of races the first half.
Look from the cockpit as going wide is Handsome Pete. Pete Herod able to keep it in front, though, as Melnarowicz forced to check up on the gas. 3 estimated to go for them, under 5 minutes on the clock for the season opener for the Major Series European Pro Split here at the Glen.
Start wondering at this battle, Wasilewski's not a million miles down the road. It's about 4 seconds, so if there is something that goes wrong with Wasilewski, they could pick up second here in this battle. But now here's the big key that they've got in this scrap. Melnarowicz is in prime position. If you're on the last lap and you're in a scrap, where would you rather be, in front or behind? I'd say behind. You get that run all the way up through the S's section. You can go out there, you can attack it as much as you can. You can give yourself that opportunity late. More importantly is that you don't really have to do too much adjusting when lap traffic comes behind, because you're dictated by the line of the car in front of you. He'll have to slow up at the same time as you, but you can put the power down earlier to put the pressure down on with 3.5.
It's getting pretty treacherous when it comes to this battle, coming up to 2 final laps estimated for these drivers this time, approaching 3 minutes on the clock. Conway, the overall race leader, is up by 3.2 seconds over Barrett. Pataska's leading his respective class by a sizable 1 minute.
Pretty much says all you need to know here. 1 minute's lead, and he's had a little bit of fortune to have that lead of a minute, but you know, they don't ask you how, they ask you how many. And I'd say, how many does Dallas Pataska have? He has a minute, and he has earned every single second of that.
Just has to stay clean for a few more times around, especially with how the battles could fare. Framneers, by the way, came back out of the pit lane after 5 minutes and 49 seconds of repairs to try and take the checkered at the minimum. But for Jamie Conway, lap and a half to go estimated. Conway nearly spins it from the lead.
He's trying to push. Don't blame him here. Toe of the boot is one of the toughest sections of the track, and Christian, you know and understand that as well. He had to get some opposite lock on because he just clipped the curb on the inside.
Yeah, and I'm surprised he's pushing as hard as he is, though. Obviously, we have seen that gap come down, but with what's essentially going to be two laps to go here when he gets to the line, I feel like he's got enough in hand to not need to do that, you know? So, a little bit surprised, although he has got some lap traffic. That's cost him probably about 3/4 of a second there. So, you know, it's not helping him out right now. I can totally see how you can feel under pressure here, but with 2 to go, I still think it's firmly tilted towards Conway at this point.
I was about to say, that's going to really impact how things could fare out for that battle between the 21 and the 69 too. That's another lap everyone's going to have to go around here.
Certainly is, and you're starting to see it now as there's Pete Harrod, who's got himself a gap now on Melnarowicz. Shouldn't be too concerned now. He's got himself about half a second, slightly pushes a little wide, but he should be fine at this point on, at this stage. There was more traffic for Conway to deal with, and it was the former Thomas Cope at the worst place on the circuit. The gap comes down now. It's 1.1 seconds, 1.2 for the race lead. I think we're going to have a last lap shootout if Barrett can get himself on the phasers and within a second's range.
It's on now. Barney the flagman expected to wave the white flag this time around. Again, it was a 10-second difference between the line and the mark. Navarro's having problems just up the racetrack from them. Will that be a factor in a moment? One car gets punted already. Here comes the race leaders. Conway moves up.
Qualified.
They drive on by as Navarro tries to cross the track. More trouble. The leaders did pass by. Barrett lost a 10th from it.
Wow, that could have been so much worse. It was a comedy of errors there from Navarro. Last lap starts, traffic in play. Barney waving the flag, 9/10 of a second the gap, and into turn number 1. This will hurt Vavrovsky there in the middle. You're going to have to compromise the line slightly, and there's trouble as they go through. Is that trouble for Conway, who's slow coming up the hill, and all of a sudden, here will come Chris Barrett. He's got himself an angle, and a line, and a way, and a no, and a how to the outside to take the lead, and he's done it.
Will this be complete though? Conway backs it up, tries to set it up, coming towards the outer loop this time. Barrett now to the race lead, had to recover from more than 5 seconds back after the two were separated on the pit sequence. Now Conway has one more section to try and find a way back around his teammate.
I wonder if he slowed up to make sure he had enough fuel to make it to the end. That will be the only reason why he dropped so dramatically on the run up through the S's section. But as he takes this rise now, if he's left himself enough on the fuel save, he'll have one place to attack. It's here at the heel of the boot. He looks to the inside. He sends up the inside. Oh, and the two make contact.
Bumping and banging Conway and Barrett, the friends. Barrett tries to reach back. Conway tries to run away. Coming to the checkered flag. Barrett slow coming out of the boot. Jamie Conway fights back with a last sector pass to retake the lead. Conway to the checkered flag will win to start the Major Series season at Watkins Glen.
You cannot write that any better. It was a huge moment, actually. Coming out of the 90, he grabbed the curb on the exit of turn number 1. That completely threw Conway's run all the way up the hill. It was nothing to do with fuel. And then from that grab, as you can see there, Pataska has won the GT3 category at a canter's run. But the key really was how LMP2 finished, and that was all about placement there from Jamie Conway, who knew he still had an opportunity left and never gave it up.
So the orange, white, and blue machines dominate in the prototypes. Meanwhile, Dallas Pataska dominates in the end with a bit of luck and a bit of help from the 11 machine to be able to win that respective class. Post-race coverage coming up in just a few moments. You're watching GSRC for coverage of the Major Series and its European region's Pro Split from the virtual Watkins Glen International on iRacing.
iRacing is a sim racing game that combines a true-to-life racing experience with an online community of virtual racers from all around the globe. iRacing offers a multitude of officially licensed cars and tracks, laser scanned with millimeter accuracy. Their car models and mechanical systems are based on real-world physics, engineered in cooperation with manufacturers and race teams. Their skill license system ranges from rookie to pro, ensuring members are always pitted against those with similar skill sets. Members are able to sign up for a weekly race series, compete in time trials, host a private race with friends, and participate in racing leagues created and run by the community. With over 170,000 members, iRacing works in partnership with renowned motorsports organizations like NASCAR to deliver virtual races based on the real-life NASCAR Cup Series, as well as many other series on the NASCAR ladder. iRacing also features team racing, providing a variety of options for members to create and manage their own teams. Race with friends or real-world teammates in full-length endurance events like the 24 Hours of Daytona, Spa 24, or the Bathurst 12 Hour. Additional partners include IMSA, World of Outlaws, Supercars, and IndyCar, allowing members to race in their very own Indianapolis 500, Bathurst 1000, Chili Bowl, and many more iconic events. This is iRacing, delivering the most authentic racing experience short of getting into a real race car. Sign up today at iRacing.com.
Welcome back to the Major Series and its European region Pro Split coverage after a showdown, to say the very least, to start off the 2022 season. Justin Pritz, Christian Challenger, Jake Sperry with you with the producer Zach Johnson, and the winners are in the midst of celebrating down on the virtual front straightaway after an exciting final lap. Let's take a look at how things fared out with your unofficial race results. Conway over Barrett by just under 0.4 of a second for the overall race win in the LMP2s, but it came down to a back and forth in the final lap after several dodged incidents, as well as both cars nearly spinning out of the 90, plus both cars going back and forth in sectors 2 and 3. Burrows, I should say, rounds out the top 3, the biggest mover 21st to 3rd. Banfield and Smits round out the top 5. Hashmi starts in 7th, finishes in 6th. Soranzo started at the back, finished in 7th. Wolf, Castles, Moore rounds out the top 10, Jake.
Absolutely. The rest of these drivers are a lap down here in your LMP2 category, which saw Adam Facciaponte finishing in 11th ahead of Nick Sidgley in 12th position. Gabriel Roos had an eventful day. 13th would be his finish, with Jens Homan and Travis Henderson 14th and 15th. 2 laps down, and in the tyres at the end was Michele Sangali after contact with Antonio Navarro and the million attempts that he had to try and flick spin his LMP2 around on the run between turns 10 and turns 11. Cordell Cologne had his very, very eventful spin about 3 laps from the end, right in front of the leaders, with Miguel Freitas 4 laps down, along with Tom Dreiling, who pretty much made friends with everybody today. The one other driver over on the next page is Theo Schleret, who was out of the race 8 laps from the end. As Christian, you have an eye on the great battles, as we see there. Ibram and Stevens did not make their way home. You have your eye on GT3.
Yeah, Dallas Patasi came away with a pretty dominant victory after the unfortunate demise of Sean Campbell. Ryan Wasilewski stole the 2nd place, but David Melneritz, after a really, really quiet race, was able to make that one-stop strategy work, and he comes home taking that 3rd spot. Ryan Walker had to make the splash and dash. He looked like he was set for a top 3, but unfortunately it falls back to 4th. And Pete Harrod, he tried to follow Melneritz onto that strategy, wasn't quite able to do it. It comes home in 5th. Trevor Vavrovsky, we saw have some issues with his number 10 Lamborghini, and unfortunately comes home in 6th, with Thomas Cope, driver who looked like he was on course for a top 3, but unfortunately just seemed to lose the tires towards the end of the race and comes home 7th. David Baker in 8th. Bram Reiners, another driver, struggled a little bit with the Lamborghini here in 9th. And Sean Campbell, we talked about him a little bit. A really unfortunate incident for him when he looked on course for a race-winning challenge.
Absolutely crazy. Absolutely wild, absolutely blistering were some of the things you could say after this one. But in the end, class winners, Conway, Pataska, to start off the brand new season. Let's start off our post-race coverage on that mark with getting the chance to speak with Dallas Pataska, who ended up coming away with the victory in his respective class. Dallas, interesting race today. Lots of adventures when it came to that battle for the race win, but you are the one who picks up the W by more than a minute.
Yeah, it was a exciting race, to say the least. It was definitely drama-filled. I didn't quite see what happened to Sean, but I know that he was working up a strategy that definitely had the chance to beat me in what I was doing. So it's unfortunate that he had the problems he had. I think it would have been great for the broadcast and ended up with some great racing between us two if he didn't run into those problems. But yeah, I would have liked to see more GT3s in the field. I thought it was kind of saturated with P2s and a lot of guys running P2s that probably would have been better off running GT3s. But at the end of the day, I'm really happy to get the 3rd year in a row getting the season started with a win. Feels pretty good, and on top of that, having a full team to run with under the satellite banner, which shout out to both the 2 Ryans in the top 5 along with me. It was nice to see them get good finishes too.
What is the team's approach like for this season, knowing you've got 2 different people named Ryan with you, but what's that focus now like to try and help you try and go for a back-to-back title run?
I'm not going to lie, we're playing it pretty fast and loose. We don't have anything too concrete set for us to follow. My goal personally is always to, back up my championship from last year, but at the same time to help develop these other guys and hopefully compete for a constructor's title as well. I feel like that's a major component of majors that makes it so unique in the team battles and team championships that go on throughout the season. And getting a bunch of guys together was in an effort to be a part of that as well, instead of just being the guy taking away points from other teams. So I'm confident in the group we have, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we do over the course of the season.
First oval race coming up, and it's going to potentially be an adventure because it's Daytona, it's the next-gen cars, Super Speedway Racing, one of the premier events for the season. Thoughts on Daytona? Because there's a lot of unknowns, let's put it that way, with what could happen over the next few weeks with the car.
Oh, for sure. You know, we don't really know what's going to happen with the car, if we're going to be running what we have now, or if we're going to get an update. You know, fingers crossed. But yeah, the 500 is the main reason why I wanted to get together a bunch of guys. I have a history of being kind of out of luck with finding people to work with at a super speedway race. So hopefully that having at least 4 other guys to work with will give me a better chance at coming away with one, or if not myself, one of my teammates. But yeah, it's not really targeting a win. It's more not wrecking and coming away with good points, because if you can come away with a good result in the first 2 rounds and get through the 500 without having to use your drop, you're set up really good for a points run. So that's ultimately the goal for me.
Anyone you want to thank for the run tonight?
I just want to shout out my teammates, Ryan and Ryan, for their top 5 finishes. They did a great job, and I'm looking forward to seeing what them and Gabriel and the other guys that are running throughout Sportsman and Pro can do.
Congratulations once again on the class victory today, Dallas.
Thanks, guys.
Dallas Pataska starts off with a victory, winning over his teammates Ryan Washaleski, with Ryan Walker in 4th position. Speaking of drivers standing on by, let's get the chance to speak with more of them after this one. I believe the next one will be speaking with Christian Challenger, believe. We stand by to see which of those drivers that will be. In fact, it will be one of the Ryans. It's Ryan Washaleski.
Ryan, it looked like a pretty good fight, actually, for 2nd place in the class. Well, it started off as a 3rd place fight. Obviously, Pataska and Sean Campbell were kind of in their own battle the first half of the race, but there was quite a bit of a difference in strategy. Obviously, some of you were able to make it on 1 stop, others had to go to the 2 stop. Even Pataska had to go to the 2 stop to be able to get to the end of the race. But you look like you just had actually a ton of pace. I mean, we saw you fall back a little bit at the start, but you pretty much got yourself back up into that fight for 3rd very, very quickly. Can you kind of talk us through the challenges of saving enough fuel to be able to do it on the 1 stop, and also obviously having to make that fight back early in the race?
Great answer.
Oh, all right. Hang on. Am I here now?
We got you.
All right. Sorry, I had push to talk still on still. I actually did a 2 stop, so I just pitted early on the 2nd one. But yeah, it was a bit of a struggle. I think it was like lap 3. I spun myself out in turn 1. So and then I dropped back to I think 10th or something like that. And by the end of that stint, I was back up into 3rd. I'm not sure what happened to Sean Campbell, but obviously he and Ian Dallas were the pace of the field. I would have been a little bit closer, but there was no chance I had anything on them. So yeah, it was a bit of a struggle. After I spun out, there was no chance I was going to be able to fuel save. I knew I had to get to the front as quickly as I could. So I'm happy with a P2. It was definitely a little difficult, especially with all the LMP traffic with so few GT3s, but that's what happens.
Oh, even better that you were able to fit that 2nd stop in then. I must have missed that because I was pretty sure that you were on that 1 stop. I saw yourself, Pataska, and Walker all pit at the same time. So I figured that you were kind of all trying to make it on 1. Obviously, Dallas did the half fuel, but if I recall correctly, you came out right alongside Walker. So yeah, good job on making the 2 stop work. You didn't even really pick up on that happened. But obviously, the pace was definitely there. As you say, you had to fight to get back into that battle after that incident early on. And, next time out is totally different. It's Daytona in the next gen. How do you even transfer between the 2?
Well, I started off iRacing as an oval driver, so I just got to kind of shake the dust off. I actually got to buy the next gen cars. But obviously, it being Daytona, it's essentially just survival. There's a little bit of strategy in there with how long the race can be, but definitely just keep your car clean and you'll end up front.
I think that's definitely good advice, and obviously it's definitely a race of survival for the most part, with it being as long as it is. And today it was 2 hours. It's kind of a little bit shorter than Daytona, but still a good managed race. And before we let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, congratulations to Dallas for winning, Walker for coming in P4. It's a good effort by Satellite in the GT3 class. I haven't really seen our results for LMP, but I'm sure those guys did great. And thanks to our sponsors, More Adness, LS Engineering, and Simic.
All right, well, thank you for coming and chatting with us. Congratulations again on the second place finish.
Thanks, guys.
Once again, that's Ryan Wacholetsky taking second spot in the GTs today. And how about the chance now to continue this run of Ryan's, I guess? How about Ryan Walker gets the chance to talk with Jake Sperry this time? Catch up with the GSRC member.
Absolutely, Ryan. This place is, I would say, familiar to you. A very, very good run for you today. A chance maybe second if the fuel would have been whispered a little bit longer, but still some solid points to take away from it here today at Watkins.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say a P4 finish is a good start and better than I expected. But yeah, kind of kicking myself for pitting when I did towards the end, because I feel anyway I cost myself a chance of a podium finish. But yeah, that's the way it goes, and I was in two minds whether to try and stretch the fuel and risk it and try and just go on one stop. But I decided to play it safe and just splash and dash. But P4 in the end, it's a good result, and also congratulations to Dallas on the win and the other Ryan finishing on second.
Talk about how difficult that race was for you. There was a whole heap of LMP2s. You were the slower class. There wasn't many of you out there. But how difficult is it to keep that much of a head on the swivel, knowing that you've got 20-odd LMPs that are looking to try and get by you at any one moment's notice?
Yeah, it's tense for sure. I mean, you've got to focus on your own race, but you've also got to focus on what's around you, what's in the LMP cars when they come up to lap you, and not get scared or flustered. Just do your thing, and that's what I done. And luckily, I never had any incidents. And from what I saw, most of the LMP drivers were pretty respectful.
And that respect certainly is there. Let's turn our mind over to Daytona, though, because that's going to be a very interesting challenge for you moving into it. Of course, the team starting to build up together, try and get a run moving forward through the field. How do you think that's going to be in terms of a challenge, that you've got 4 or 5 drivers trying to work together for a single goal, and that you've got that really unpredictable nature of new car, same sort of reality that you've been dealing with before as one of the main fixtures that stays on the majors calendar?
Yeah, I think having a bunch of drivers like Dallas and the other Ryan and a whole heap of other guys running in Sportsman, I think for Daytona, I think it will definitely be a big help in working together to improve the team and try and get the best results possible is definitely a good thing. And yeah, I've not got much experience on the oval side. Most of my experience is on the road side, so it would definitely be something new for me to learn. But looking forward to it, and it should be a good one.
Well, the floor is yours here, Ryan. Shout out sponsors. Who gets it done for you?
Just the team at Satellite Racing, the Dallas, Ryan, and the team that's racing in the major series this season, and just the Satellite Racing team in general for making it a fun atmosphere to race and be around in. And yeah, it's I think today's results as well, it's definitely proved that the stepping forward in the right direction, and it's a good indication for the season ahead.
Certainly has been. Ryan Walker there, finishing off with 4th position overall. And Justin, I believe you found the winner overall and in LMP2. I believe you found yourself a chat with Jamie Conway.
Yes, he's found his way towards the broadcast area from the virtual victory lane. Jamie, welcome to Major Series competition. Welcome to victory lane. Describe that battle towards the end when everything seemed to be starting to go crazy around you with the final lap in the 3rd.
Yeah, thanks very much for the welcome, guys. What a crazy race. So yeah, that battle, we weren't quite sure whether it was going to go an extra lap. So we were backing the pace off, and we were talking, sort of agreeing about backing the pace off, and then we saw that it was, we were going to be fine, and had a little stutter coming onto the last lap, and there's a massive bump in the middle of the exit curve of turn 1. You've got to go either to the left or to the right. And I don't know how I didn't loop it round, but collected it. And yeah, it was obviously difficult, but yeah, just had to send it at the end. It was a bit too Max Verstappen for my liking, but got the job done.
Decent way to put that, to say the least. But yeah, curious on how this strategy played out in turn, because one of your team manager, I believe your team manager actually came at one point saying, "You're all working together. We're going to be synced up and racing for the back at the end." Then about 5 minutes later, there was a 7-second difference in pit deltas. What happened there?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we had strategies for various scenarios. We wanted to make sure that we had the best possible team finish first and foremost. But we knew, I mean, this is our main combo, to be honest, the LMP2s for Apex Tech. So we knew we were going to be strong, and we could see that the pace was enough to make the 3-stop happen. And so at that point, Chris pulled the trigger because he was struggling in my dirty air. So he decided to go early. So that was it then. We weren't talking, and we had to try and get it done ourselves because we knew we were going to have it covered from behind. So yeah, I covered him off, thought I had the pace, and he got held up, I think, at the last stop, which meant that I kept the lead at the end, had quite a healthy lead. But yeah, the international race, I think, was more of a 2-stop because it was slightly hotter, but this was cooler than we expected, so the 3-stop worked better. But yeah, it was tricky. Yeah. Crazy, really. Pleased to be so dominant at the first event.
Well, the second event of the season brings your group into stock car racing, because it's the next gen cars, which is a car that's still in flux, obviously, at a super speedway for 200 laps. Your thoughts on racing in the Great American Race?
Yeah, I'm really excited to get involved with the overall side of the series. We're really hyped to sort of give it, get involved with all these different combos. So we got the stock cars and looking forward to the Indy cars as well, various other things. The Daytona 500, what a classic, of course. I went to see the Coke Zero 400 when I was a kid over in Florida, and it was, absolutely brilliant. So really excited for that. It's going to be new for a lot of us, but we've got a lot of US guys on the team helping us out. We'll be doing lots of practice with the American sportsman team that we've got as well. So practicing running around in the trains and doing that kind of thing. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Anyone you want to give a shout out to after this run? A big debut for the team this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge thanks to Apex Technologies. They back our team. We've grown so far in the last year, 9 months or so, racing in SEO in Ivra. So EJ Fulner and Ryan, they're doing an amazing job for us. Apex Tech Racing Supply, they're going to start supplying racing hardware in the US as well. And our other sponsors, TPI and Meridian, Pro Simrig, and the rest of the team for all their help and support with setups, with strategy, especially Chris with the strategy. He's really on it. So, yeah, huge thanks.
Congratulations once again on the run, Jamie.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
Jamie Conway, a big-time victory for a group looking to build on that momentum mentioned. Chris Barrett, meanwhile, had a very solid run in second. We talked a bit about that decision-making from Jamie's perspective. Now Chris gets to discuss that same perspective from his side of viewpoint now at the same time, should say, with Jake Sperry. Jake?
Hey, Chris. That would have been a very important final few laps for you, because it seemed like the track and the other drivers around you threw everything in front of you. You had that big issue with Cordell Cologne just in front with a handful of laps to go, and somehow you still found your way to within a second and within the race lead with it in touch and grasp heading onto the final lap.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think my heart's still beating from that one. I was pushing super hard in the last 5 laps trying to catch up to Jamie, who'd done an excellent job, it's fair to say, through the race. And to be honest, he gave me a bit of a gift running wide and getting loose in turn 1. I saw my chance. But to be honest, looking at the replays, I think it was a bit sloppy from me not to defend the inside into the last few corners. So fair and square from Jamie. I think it was an excellent move. But I think the great news is just that Jamie and I, as teammates, we work so well together. and we were only separated by half a second at the end of a 2-hour race, even though we went our separate ways about the half distance mark. So overall, we can't be too disappointed with the 1-2. Of course, having pole, I really wanted to take the win, but for the team, it's a perfect result.
It's a car you obviously have a lot of history with, a car that you probably have a lot to work with in terms of moving forward. But what prompted the decision to jump into the Majors series, especially with this as an opening round?
Yeah, I think really the variety is what attracted us to the league. I think both Jamie and I fancy ourselves as all-rounders, and even though we drive the P2 quite a lot as our main car for the official races, we enjoy a bit of oval driving and jumping in different combinations. So I'm personally really looking forward to driving things like the Porsche Cup and the V8 Supercar and the oval stuff as well, which I used to do maybe 5 years ago on iRacing. I used to do a lot of C fixed and things like that in the trucks. But I'm looking forward to the opportunity to kind of get motivated to improve my oval racing and improve as a driver generally. And I think it's a lot of us in the team are a bit like that. We like the variety.
Daytona next time up, what's the plan?
Beat Jamie is the plan for me. I think it's going to be, we should have a strong showing again. Of course, the oval guys will kind of come out the woodwork and show us how it's done, I'm sure. But hopefully I'll make it to the end and then we'll go from there. That's the plan.
Well, that is certainly the plan. Floor's yours though, Chris. Shout out sponsors, anyone you'd like to thank.
Sure. I think Jamie did a great job of introducing Apex Technologies and all our great sponsors, TPI, Meridian, Hippo Sports Management, BPS Sims. I just want to say thanks to the rest of the team, Theo, James and Hash, who helped us prepare. And even though I think they got a little bit unlucky in the race, they were really helpful in the preparation, and I'm sure you'll see them going forwards. And I just want to say best of luck to our team competing in the US region, EJ, Lee and Matt. Hopefully they can emulate some of our success.
Well, hopefully we'll see that to come later on today. Chris Barrett there joining us, second place overall with that result, Justin.
One more driver will have the chance to speak with us. That's Joshua Wolf. Joshua will get the chance to speak with Christian.
Josh, it was kind of a bit of an interesting race for yourself. Obviously started a little bit further back than we're sort of used to seeing you, back in 13th. Oh, as we appear to have lost him.
Found him.
And he's back. Josh, so we're just saying, a bit of an interesting race for you, obviously starting back in about 13th. You were able to come through into the top 10 and finish 8th. A little bit behind David Soranzo at the end there, about 7 or so seconds. Now, it looked quite the time, I think is the best way to put it, in the LMPs, especially in that first hour or so. And can you kind of give us a bit of perspective on what that was like with everybody in that battle that essentially went from third all the way to the tail end of the field?
Yeah, it was... For me, it's a lot of experience from Autobahn. Everything's just so close with the P2s, especially when you get up to this level. And I knew that there'd probably be issues, especially in the bus stop, with how you got to run it. And that kind of played out lap 1, gained quite a few spots with people going off and there. And then kind of later in the race, too, just happened that you really can't go too wide if you're trying to go flat out through those corners. So that was probably the biggest issue there, just trying to survive that beginning portion and see where we kind of came out towards the end.
And we heard a little bit already about kind of the decision between doing a 2 and a 3 stop, and we saw it as well in GT3 as to whether you did a 1 or a 2 stop. And how did you kind of decide your own strategy and which direction to go? Was it kind of based on where you were running in the race? Was it sort of pre-planned before you even started the race? How do you and did you ever think of switching in the race?
No switches during the race. We've done enough of this with kind of the Autobahn that strategy is very key in those races, and typically trying to get as far as you can on your tank. Try and shorten that last stop is the best plan there. I was really happy with that they got the change with the track state, because I was killing tires before the update this week. So if that had happened, I think it would have been tires every single stop. But with the update, I just kind of worked on the setup to make sure I was going to be balanced and keep the tires on it for the first 2 stints, and then take tires at the end of that second stint to go to the end, just with a quick splash at the end.
Oh, it definitely makes sense. And next time out, we're at Daytona again, completely different challenge with the next gen car. And again, sort of a bit of a strategy race, and we know that team play at those races is kind of a really big deal. And obviously this season, it looks like we've got quite a number of big teams in the league. Do you think that's going to sort of change the approach for Daytona, or do you think it's going to kind of be the status quo where everybody sort of groups up with their teammates and then just runs their own race, and hopefully that works out with their line of, say, 5 or 6 cars being at the head of the field at the end of the race?
I think it's definitely going to be heavily team race. Definitely exciting to see Dallas get some guys, and now that Apex Tech group, I'm definitely interested to see how the 500 is. We've always been really good there, so it'd be cool to have quite a bit of competition up there. But if you get up front and can control the field at the end of the race, that's going to be key.
For sure. And before we let you go, you mentioned a little bit about team and whatnot. You want to give anybody a shout out?
I give everybody on our team a shout out. We've been working hard, especially since the update. I know I've been really dialed in on this P2, trying to find the pace for qualifying and then race. But all the other guys out there, trying to help them out, giving me feedback to help all of our setup in general. Some of us definitely a little bit harder with work schedules, but we all got our feedback in and tried to help out best we could, maximize team points.
Thank you for coming and chatting with us, and good luck for Daytona.
Thank you, guys.
Once again, Joshua Wolf rounds out our post-race interviews, and I'll start with you, Jake. Your final thoughts on what was an intriguing race, to say the very least, with a lot of strategy, some intrigue, some drivers getting themselves in the midst of craziness, and some theatrics towards the end.
As is predictable with this series, there's not much you can really glean from an incredible race like this. I think the race speaks for itself, but what will be key is how drivers change their mentality for Daytona, a completely different style of racing, something that I'm sure everyone is going to be wanting to put as a feather in their cap. But really, I think it's going to take 2 or 3 races to really see who's masterminding everything. And then that's when we can really start deriving, okay, who's going for here, there, and everywhere over the course of this season.
And for you, Christian, your thoughts on how this broke down, and in turn, what drivers should expect the next time out?
Well, obviously, with the next gen at Daytona, it's going to be quite a different experience to what people are used to. We've kind of already seen with the updated drafting and whatnot that it is very, very different. You absolutely have to work with each other, and that's going to be a big part of where the teams come into play. Historically at Daytona, and especially in the European region, we've kind of seen a TFR domination, really, where they stack the field out with a huge number of cars, and then they try and control the race and control it with strategy, and just trying to keep all their cars at the head of the field as long as possible, which, is pretty much the goal of anybody. But certainly teams, super important at super speedway tracks, especially with regards to strategy, blocking runs from other groups and whatnot. So I totally expect a team race there. And I think it's interesting to me that inside the top 5 for LMP at Watkins Glen, there's only one name, really, from past seasons in the Major Series, and that was Ross Banfield in 4th. All the other 4 spots in the top 5 were taken up by newcomers to the series.
It's all going to be very intriguing to see, to say the very least, with that action. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for tuning in for today's racing action when it comes to the Majors Garage 2 Hours of the Glen here at iRacing's virtual Watkins Glen International. We'd like to thank you for tuning in for today's exciting action for the Majors Series, who organizes this exciting action, and congratulate them on a strong start to the 2022 campaign for the European Pro Split. Thanks to the companies who provide the software and hardware for our broadcast, now listed up on screen. Additional thanks go to Jude Lalonde, who provides the wonderful music. See the screen to how to get a hold of more of her great work. Thanks to today's team in Christian, Jake, Zach, and Dougie. You can find more info about them and GSRC at globalsimracingchannel.com or through social media as listed on screen. Be sure to check out the merchandise store as well at gsrc.stormvy.com. We keep the link in the description to the YouTube version of these broadcasts below. Speaking of YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to it, as well as hit the notification bell for our channel so you don't miss a moment here on GSRC. As talked about, the next time out for the European side will be for the Daytona 500. That's in a couple weeks' time. You can catch that at 11:45 a.m. Eastern. But the Majors American region will also hit the racetrack tonight here on GSRC for their chance to run at Watkins Glen. Coverage for that, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to tune in. And for the date for the Daytona action, that's February the 6th, 11:45 a.m. Eastern once more, 4:45 GMT. We also have upcoming races for other series on the schedule. It's listed on screen. So be sure to check those out and mark them down in your calendar. Until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.